Now then, guys, um, today's episode's a little bit different. Normally, I have like some sort of food-related guest. Obviously, I've said before on the podcast that I don't really want it to just be all coffee shops, restaurants, stuff like that. I want it to be basically anybody with kind of like a passion, a dream, a goal, anything that kind of like inspires them, like or big things that they aspire to do. So for today's episode, I've got basically a cannabis expert. He's a cannabis mythbuster and a master of cannabinoid research and sciences. He's got a PhD in cannabinoid research, and he basically runs a company that advises people on sort of the safe standards and procedures, the legislations of what like is required for doing business within cannabis. So yeah, like I said, a little bit different, very interesting. He's one of my quite good friends, so it's really nice to just sit down and talk with him. It was really nice to just kind of chat away. So yeah, let's get to it. Cheers, guys. Cool. Right, so today's episode, I've got a different guest. Normally I go down the food route, go down sort of speaking about sort of individual businesses and stuff like that, kind of highlighting more what they do. But obviously I've got a good friend and I've got somebody that specialises in something that normally gets a bit of a bad reputation. So we kind of want to break some myths and I kind of want to break it down and you can kind of explain like kind of the good points, maybe actually break down some of the bad points and the reasons behind them or what they get. So today's guest, I've got Chris, also known as Chris TheCannaman, who is a master of cannabinoid research and a cannabis mythbuster. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you, Tom, and hopefully we can, dispel some of those myths and help people get a better understanding of cannabis research, what the truth is, and maybe it can be beneficial to some of you as well.
Yeah, definitely so, because I think it definitely gets a bad reputation on a whole. Obviously, in the UK, it's technically classed as illegal for most part, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Obviously, there is medical circumstances that go into that, and obviously we'll talk about that as we're going on. But before we do, just kind of like to get into a little bit about you and your background. Kind of how did you get into this? How did you get into sort of like the medical side of cannabis research? Do you know what I mean? And kind of the benefits of what it does or what it can be applied to. So yeah.
Yeah, well, going all the way back, sort of university time when I started my little journey, so to speak, I hadn't really heard of cannabis or anything like that until getting to university. I sure there'd been some weed at high school or whispers of cannabis, but in general, I don't know whether it was just our school, but there was no discussion of drugs. There was no discussion of alcohol.
It's definitely our school.
Certainly students, but like the teachers never raised it as an issue. There was never even mention of, oh, don't drink, don't look out for alcohol. We didn't have any of like the sort of fear mongering around drugs. So everyone was just sort of like none the wiser really to drugs basically as a whole. Maybe some people's older siblings had talked about drugs, what have you, but it never really crossed my mind. And it wasn't until I got to university where I started to see, oh, that's how drugs interact with the body. And the study of the body and drugs and medicine is sort of medical research. And I didn't really put any of those pieces together till, end of high school, getting into university. But cannabis was never really
So it was never on your radar.
Never really on my radar at all. And if anything,
that you thought, oh, this is something I want to pursue, or had like an understanding of.
not at all. No, never thought considered it a career. Never thought it was
that's crazy
a vocation or anything like
mine's
that.
like a totally different aspect to that because mine's like I went to a school that was a little bit naughtier. Do you know what I mean? It's like you said, there you had the older brothers, your cousins that kind of introduced you to it. It was like kind of it was very taboo, but like everyone knew what it was. Do you know what I mean? So most people had like kind of like smoked a little bit, had an edible,
Yeah.
had a around
Yeah,
and had
yeah,
something
yeah,
in
yeah.
there. Do you know what I mean? So, but like once again, didn't have a clue of like the effects of it. It was all just like psychoactive.
Anything could happen, sort of.
Anything could
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Yeah, no regulation, no anything. So obviously, like you're saying there, you didn't know anything about it. So how did you like kind of get into it with the whole like within university, within
Yeah.
studying, within stuff like that? Was
So I guess around when I was moving into university, so this is like 2014, 2015, that's when there was a bit more of a cannabis conversation going on the news. And I'd always seen, you do see the stuff about the sort of drug war when you're younger, and you hear about, oh, drugs were legal and all that sort of stuff. But then
like
when I actually saw what drugs were, I was like, well, that's a plant. That's kind of hilarious that everyone's so. I was more perplexed that people were so afraid, and there was such like this human stigma and fear around what was a plant.
yeah, when there's so many other things that like, especially that are bad for you, that are plants that people don't tend to care about or that get used for other medicinal purposes. Do you know what I mean? That people don't speak about. It's like tobacco is a plant. Like it's the biggest like selling plant in the world.
Completely.
Do you know what I mean? And yet there's like people making billions upon billions on it, and yet no one really talks about the fact that it's just a plant. But yet there's all the other sides of it. Do you know what I mean?
Completely.
But they kind of
Completely.
push it under the rug a little bit until the kind of the past sort of 20 years, really. Do you know what I mean? 20, 30 years, everyone's like, yeah, smoking it is actually bad for you.
It's strange because we have these stories around things, and it's almost like the myth of the creature or the legend
Yeah, then
of
with the
the.
actual fact of what can be put out there to people and
Yeah,
going, you know what, this is the actual information.
yeah, yeah. If you heard about Napoleon, you'd think he was this 10-foot tall monster that ate humans for breakfast,
Yeah,
but
of
is
course it
actually
is,
just
like
a
a
normal
4 foot tall
guy
giant.
who did amazing things. So it's same with cannabis, really. Like I was always perplexed. Well, going on to how I ended up studying it, right through school, I was just thought it was bizarre how people treated drugs and how some things got more attention than others, and I didn't really see how all of that connected together. And so the more I went through university, and I ended up doing, it was medical physiology and therapeutics, which is like basically a medical research degree. So studying the medicines and the procedures that will be used by doctors. So medical researchers essentially go out, explore the world, and turn that research and science into medical devices, new drugs, new medicines, or new procedures that will help doctors in the clinic, essentially. So that's sort of where the medical research ties to medicine. And as I started learning more about medical research, I actually found that more interesting than medicine, um, in the day to day,
So
should I
it's about
say.
how to apply these different things to
Yeah,
sort of the
it's far
everyday.
more theoretical and creative. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of creativity in medicine, and a lot of
But is it?
borderline magic in medicine to make
But it's
things
kind of a
happen.
bit more like cooking, isn't it?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
terms of like there is a guideline. Do you know what I mean?
Making the menu versus
Yeah, then
implementing the
creating
menu.
and like yeah, exactly that. All right, yeah,
So
that
that's
makes
probably
sense.
the comparison I'd make for food. Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good analogy there, Tom. So essentially, I found that really interesting, and I wondered then, okay, so where does the basis of the medical program come from? Essentially, so scientists will get together, study a field, investigate something that's popped up, and the questions emerge like, oh, will this help in this setting, or can this disease benefit from this new intervention or treatment? And you sort of see how the medical system and the medical process is constructed. And over the history of that, over the last 50, 60, 80 years, post war basically, since we've created the new
yeah.
medical system. And then you see the funding behind that. Where does the money come from? Okay, so businesses in the industry sponsor some research at the university. Then the students work on some of that research as part of their research program, and you sort of see how the medical system's built up basically, and
Yeah,
how
yeah.
that interacts with the industry, how that interacts with universities and students, and what role they play. And then how that ties into the treatments that we get at hospital. So started off super boring, to be honest. There was a lot of repetition really for the first year. Like most of the biology stuff I'd already done before, most of the cell stuff I'd already done before. So I was doing lots of tangential reading and doing all sorts of other things as well, getting up to no good, eating too much food, the usual. And so we then got to specialize as we sort of went through the years of the degree. And one topic popped up, and I thought, oh, CBD. What's that? Is that something to do with cannabis or cannabidiol? And you hear about it on, I don't know, I must have had it on some YouTube videos, or there's certainly lots of things going on in the news by then.
I was going to say it definitely started cropping up more so within like the last 10 years, especially with the like CBD side of things. Obviously, we'll get into like the differences of like THC and CBD, but obviously, like CBD did start like a large push through because obviously there was like just what we kind of spoke about there was the negative connotations of it were now taken away from it because the psychoactive effect of cannabis was no longer involved. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was like, oh well, actually we can benefit from this now. So without there being potential harm, I guess.
That was the theory. So, seeing all those headlines around, it was pretty. You saw the stigma around schizophrenia and cannabis, and how there was all these sort of mass. I guess we were just going through a phase of like really promoting the drug war at that point, and I don't know if that was maybe the dying ends of the drug war propaganda, and now we see more pro-drug propaganda in terms of like cannabis and psychedelics and other drugs. But
well, that was a lot to do with like I guess it was kind of the end of the sort of Tony Blair era, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
definitely a political element.
war again, like because that was kind of where it was like really pushed through, especially through like the early 2000s.
Yeah, yeah,
like through to the 2010s was kind of that Blair era of like we need to clamp down on this, we need to clamp down on that. Do you know what I mean? And it was like realistically, all the money was kind of going in the wrong places. Like
a lot of money was being made by a few people. Yeah. So that whole conversation was happening publicly, I suppose, and so you caught glimpses of these things in the headline, but you didn't really know what was going on. And there were different patient groups, different campaign groups, and I think everyone's seen the video of the man from America with Parkinson's, where he takes some oil under his tongue, he's having a dreadful sort of muscle spasms, and all of a sudden he's then able to sit down and be calm and just be at peace again. And I think that's probably the first video that most people have seen where they go, "Oh."
I think the first video I've seen with that, especially, obviously, like I said, for me personally, this is something I take recreationally, like with cannabis itself, for a long time. But there's, I think the first video that I seen was the young girl who had epilepsy, and then I also seen the one with the dog.
Oh,
It was
sure.
someone with a, I think they had Staffordshire Bull Terrier or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that, and the same thing. The dog had constantly had seizures,
Mm.
but it was to the point where the dog was having seizures 20 times a day.
Yeah, yeah.
It was basically going to kill it. It was going to have brain aneurysms. Do you know what I mean? It was, and then they just started giving it
Yeah.
oil, and then the next thing it was just like it calmed down. It wasn't having the seizures. It was maybe having one a week instead of like 20 a day.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
It just seems to be like a common thing with it, but it wasn't researched then at the time, was it? Like obviously that's where it must have pushed through.
There was a bit of a like at the end of the day, there's always like a narrative that's put out there around whatever we're talking about at the time. So the media is always putting out a story about something, and there was a story to be told around cannabis at the time. Some people wanted the law to change. There's certain companies that were making a lot of money from having the law the way it was. And so basically, a lot of those families were used as like a stepping stone almost. Like people saw that they really needed it, and they also saw that as an opportunity to be able to build a company around that and say, hey, look, they really need this. We can supply that. You should give us money so we can help them. And so that's where the sort of cannabis industry came from around 2018, 2019, and just a bit before then, before the law changed and Sajid Javid did the whole announcement. But it was a lot of, you rightly said, like there's a lot, basically, all of the families with children with Hart Street epilepsy were part of a campaign that led to that law change. And they were promised that all of that would be free when the law did change, and that they would be saved, and that we wouldn't have to go. Some of them were flying to the Netherlands to bring back cannabis prescriptions because it could be legally prescribed there, but they couldn't bring it back to the UK. So there was a whole sort of Dallas Buyers Club of people going to the Netherlands, getting prescribed and smuggling it back on the plane.
Yeah, and then
MPs knew, and so everyone was trying to help each other out. And so it was like this really ropey ecosystem because there was tons of patients who'd heard all of this medical impressiveness, let's say, and then lots of people that probably wanted to help, and then a lot of people that were there to make a lot of money off of it. And so you had a mixture of really needy patients and then a very unreliable source of products and information and everything else around that. And so people were selling all sorts of crap to all sorts of patients, and loads of people being ripped off. And obviously, they're desperate, needy families. Like your granddad's dying of cancer, your mum's got epilepsy, or your kid's got epilepsy, and you think this can help them. Unfortunately, it was mainly the black market that was there to sort of like provide that service. Unfortunately,
so when did you when did you first start studying, like going into actually studying this? Or like, what year was it that you went into doing this?
So, degree started in 2014. I graduated 2014, and 2015, 2016. That's when we started specializing in whatever we want to specialize in. And halfway through that degree is when you got to pick what your specialty was next year. And this was all going on in the background. Lots of different conversations were happening. I don't know, trying to be helpful to people and what have you.
So obviously, like you said, because like your thing is going out and looking for those, like, you're kind of like essentially like the middleman, aren't you? You're going out and looking at the research and, like you said, looking at like what can be used and what can be kind of tailored to help people within the industry, obviously within medical science. So then obviously that's where your interest is kind of came to, as you've seen this thing and then being like, hang on a second, there's something not sort of sitting right here, or there's something I can be applying myself to.
Yeah,
you know
completely.
I mean?
So yeah, saw that I could. We had a list of probably like 20 topics you could choose from. There was ones where you could play with zebrafish. There's ones where someone was doing like worms in space for NASA. There was other ones where they were looking at just literature reviews. So you go out and look at 10,000 papers and turn that down into one paper that summarizes 10,000. And so I saw this one CBD in the gut. And at the time, I had a lot of gut problems. And so I thought, oh, CBD and the gut, that's perfect. Like, that I'm studying myself basically at this point. And
it's a kind of nice thing to go into and be able to apply yourself. Than something that you just don't
get. It's got no relation to me, the zebrafish and the genetics of the zebrafish, but the gut, I could go and study guts and gut disorders, which I had, and then CBD, which is potential treatment, which I needed. So I was like, oh, awesome, I'll go study this. And a very lovely lady called Saoirse O'Sullivan, who's my professor, she opened up another space for me. So we were going, it was pulled out of a bucket, right? So there was an auditorium, everyone got to choose what they wanted. And so as your name was pulled out the bucket, you got to say what you wanted.
Yeah.
There was one person just before me who went, oh, CBD in the gut. And I was like, you bugger, you ruined it. You ruined my day. I'm next out the bucket. I was like, oh, well, I'm wounded because I really wanted to do that one with you, Saoirse. And she was like, oh, well, I'll open up another space here. I was like, oh, no way. That's awesome. So ended up doing that. I was working with a couple of surgeons who were gut surgeons. And they were essentially going in, working with patients that had advanced colorectal cancer. So huge tumors in the gut, terrible, terrible pain, and cutting out that portion of cancerous diseased gut, taking that out and then stitching the other pieces together. And then we'd go and study that sausage of cancer, basically. Go to the pathology suite, chop that up, take it to the lab, slice it up, section it up, turn it into samples, and then freeze those samples ready for use in the study. So yeah, it's pretty gnarly. So to start with, we were looking at inflammation of the gut, and so we were measuring the inflamed pieces of gut tissue before and after treatments. with CBD and endocannabinoids, which are cannabinoids that your body produces naturally. And so before and after, measuring the proteins and analyzing the proteins through a number of different assays and staining. So basically, you can stain cells, stain proteins with a color, and depending on the power of that color, the strength of that color or frequency that's emitted, you can work out the content of what's in there.
That's pretty crazy.
Crazy stuff.
That is pretty mental.
So yeah, you'd take this serum, take the juice, put it in this machine, stain it all up, spit it all out, scan it, and it'd tell you what the protein content was of the various proteins that you're measuring. So some of them were related to inflammation. The cells release them when they're angry and inflamed, and then the other ones, you could sort of measure the fall of that afterwards. And so what we were doing was measuring lots without them, tracking how they do on their own, some with CBD, tracking how those do on their own, and then some with endocannabinoids and both, see how those do. So you end up just pipetting like crazy, trying to, honestly, so many little wells and samples, scanning so many things.
Imagine just like a million little labels.
Yeah. Oh my God. Honestly, Tom, it's like, again, like cooking.
Yeah, just
I've got my microgreens here and my oregano there. So
it's definitely a lot more intense than cooking.
there's less. Well, you could certainly infect yourself pretty aggressively too on both sides, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose.
But a big hygiene element too. So during that, and you learn all sorts about everything whilst you're doing this, because you're learning about contaminations, keeping sterile surfaces, all the COVID stuff that was pretty useful info to have. And then also you were able to see quite a lot of the bad information that was being put out about COVID as well. Tangent. But
that's a bit. Well, obviously that's the thing, though, isn't it? Because I think everyone. This is a little side tangent. I'm just going to go off with you on.
Yeah.
It's like obviously coronavirus has always been a thing.
You know, yeah.
Like, obviously the whole like COVID and like the strain of what we had, but for some reason everyone's just suddenly seeing it as like this thing that's came from nowhere. But like Corona has been like multiple cases of things.
Going back to that machine that we were talking about, Tom, that gets fired up and tells stories. Like, the story was just about this random virus from a lab in China, and none of that added up with what was going on scientifically or what we were reading in the literature or anything like that. So you could tell something was off, but most people wouldn't have had the time to read it all, understand what was going on, or know different proteins or infection rates or whatever. But all of that info has been incredibly helpful moving forward. But you just see the fundamentals of biology in cells in the human body and how it reacts to outside stimulus, and how delicate it all is, really, and how easily influenced it is, how easy it is to actually accidentally infect a sample, or how hard it is to actually standardize anything as well. Because when you're talking about such small analytical pieces, there's no such thing as sterile, really. It's just what functions in that ecosystem, because it could be there'll be all sorts of stuff in there you don't want there, but you can't measure the billion different things that are in the sample. You're only measuring
such micro.
Honestly, it's ridiculous, and it shows you how little you actually can know when it comes to medical research as well. And I think this is where medicine sometimes gets a bit ahead of itself, is that they treat everything with absolute certainty a lot of the time. Or it's maybe taken for granted how strong the information is and reliable the information is.
I think that as like an outside perspective, because obviously I have no clue when it comes to this side of stuff. I think that is seen as massive ignorance anyway, though, because at the end of the day, like, science constantly shifts. Do you know what I mean? Like, the science is always going to shift
100%.
Because at the end of the day, it's called evolution. Do you know what I mean? So it's the same with like you just said there about coronavirus and stuff like that. Well, that's just an evolution of already mutated virus. Do you know what I mean? So it's like you can't always be spot on with something. You're never going to be correct with something at all times, especially when it comes to science. And I'm going to use the analogy of cooking again. Is like, you might think this one thing is the exact way that you do something, but then someone can come along and go, but what about this way?
Have you tried it with butter?
And have you tried it in this environment?
Yeah.
And have you tried it under this circumstance?
Completely.
Do you know what I mean? And then you've got, actually, you know what? I need to take a step back and look.
No, it's not the only way to do it. You do it much
Yeah,
other
exactly.
ways.
Which I guess is quite rewarding, like for what you do. Do you know what I mean? It's like you get to, your job's always going to, or what you do is always going to like be ever growing and ever constantly like researched, and especially considering it's not that researched or it's not that publicly available in the UK.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? It is kind of held a little bit behind closed
Big
doors
time.
still, isn't it? Because it's not legal. So that until they can kind of, we'll go back to what we were talking about with the whole like government side of things, until they can kind of realize where, how much money they can make from it and what can be monetized and who can make the money from it, is that's when it'll be decided into when there's like a full legality of it, or as to certain regulations that we can have within this country that allow it to not be like a slap on the wrist or getting jail time or getting fined or whatever else. Like,
what's interesting, Tom, is a lot of them have known about how much medical potential is there for a very long time, because they built companies that monetize all of that for a long time, meanwhile keeping it illegal for the public.
yeah.
So
well,
lots of it's being commercialized privately by people that have known.
Husband, or you know, Theresa May's husband, is
Someone
it?
like that.
Or
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's got a company that does that exact same thing, but you know,
There's a
we
few
don't talk about those things.
unsavory.
So you got into cannabis studies.
That's how it started. Looking at the
Obviously,
guts.
you were looking at your guts, and so what did you learn from that? What did you
Yeah.
kind of like? What did you make? Sorry, what did it make you go? Oh, actually, there's something I can tailor this into, like a career path out of, and something I want to
Still
do.
hadn't even considered any of that
Have
yet.
you not?
No. So I was maybe 20 or 21 at that time. 20. And that's when I thought, oh, well, I'm finding this out about CBD and how it affects the body. People's parents started messaging me, oh, because Chris is studying that, he might be able to help you out. Or did you know? I don't know, it'd be like a strange connection. You'd speak to someone, oh, what are you studying? Oh, I'm doing cannabinoid research or whatever. People would then go, oh, you need to speak to my auntie, or you need to speak to my uncle. And you just ended up having so many bizarre conversations where you're seeing people who are dying of brain tumours taking it, and then 6 months later they're all right.
Yeah.
I'm reading about
we
it.
know quite a few people
Yeah.
that's happened to, yeah, and like obviously it wasn't. We'll get into that on this, but
Well, yeah. So I was then going from like, okay, I'm reading this in the research and reading this in the literature and having these academic conversations, which are all very far removed from reality, and it's all very theoretical. But then over here, I've got friends and family members and their parents and everyone else in between who need it right now and are using it right now. And so I ended up getting involved in all these patient conversations. I was doing like little research portfolios for patients and going, hey, look, I'll just put that together and send it through to you so you can work out whether it's something you want to do or not. The next question became, oh, where do we get it from? I don't know. So there was a few companies setting up that were trying to provide supplies to people, and for the most part, it was all imported from overseas. So all of this like pseudo industry was popping up whilst I was doing the studying, and so the two were sort of happening in real time. And so I was getting like a research grade view alongside the real world problems that people were having. And so I got to see a nice sort of tie together of, oh, well, look, this is how you got to see how medical research can help people in real time. But the problem at the moment is it takes 20 years before it goes through the medical system before anyone in the public actually gets it.
Yeah.
So there's this huge delay. And I think, again, this is just, again, the big picture, wider fundamental, I suppose, or wider principles. I think that we could get far more researchers out of the lab to go and do useful stuff for society. A lot of the time, the research they're doing is like 20 years, 30 years from being used ever, and it's not very practical or rewarding, or you're not getting the most out of what you could be doing as a researcher with the knowledge you've got, if you know what I mean. Like, it becomes like you're doing the repetitive chefing in a way.
Yeah, it kind of feels like your work's not getting rewarded for the work that you're putting in now, and unfortunately in 20 years' time it might do, but
Yeah.
you're going to be rewarded to somebody else that's already took your work and kind of been working on that
or someone's made a company and made all the money off of it, and I've done the research for 10 years and just been studying like an idiot now, and I've got nothing at the end of it. And you hear all those different perspectives at the same time of people going, "Oh, the industry is really scary," or "Oh, you shouldn't get into industry; it's really bad," or you should just stay in academia and get into teaching and do this other stuff. And so you hear all the different directions that people go.
But
and
then there's no application to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the reward from that if you're just going to
exactly
repeating yourself to people? You're not actually being able to apply yourself to something that you can physically see. Like you said, you've got the theoretical research in front of you. You've got the things that you can write about for 20 years. But then if you've literally got people that you know that are reaching out to you going, well, actually, there's this person that you need to speak to. There's this person that is actually taking, say, obviously we haven't spoken about these things, but taking stuff the likes of like RSO oil and taking things that like aren't spoken about at all, obviously.
Yeah.
Like cannabis just gets classed as weed, gets classed as you get in a block of resin.
It gets written off with the black market drug paraphernalia, and it doesn't. People don't realise like there's a natural plant
down into the actual
properties.
That it actually is that can benefit people, and I can imagine like why would anybody want to do that when you can physically see like there's actually a side of this that is helping people.
I can help them, or I can sit here in my little comfortable lab being a little autistic.
Running numbers.
Yeah, literally. So I think a lot of scientists get lost in that lab environment. It's very comfortable, and you don't have to interact with people. You don't have to. It's super safe, but then also it becomes like medicine in that you're just doing the same thing over and over again, working yourself.
But I guess like all the. Obviously, I'm generalizing here, but like obviously, anybody that you hear throughout history that has came up with any sort of invention, has found anything, hasn't done it just by sat there. Do you know what I mean? They've done it by practical application. Like it has to come from practical application. It has to come from not just theoretics. It has to come from going out and doing research in a day-to-day basis, and like because otherwise it doesn't work, does it? Do you know what I mean? You can sit and think of stuff all you want, but if it's not put into practice, then it doesn't work.
Also, on that point, you make a good point. Like, it doesn't really set you up to be the best problem solver. Like, at the end of the day, you're meant to be doing like intellectual exploration as a scientist and like uncovering new things and discovering stuff. You can't discover stuff if you're just doing as you're told and going through repeating the processes, and so you're just wasting your own intellect. I think it's almost like a thought trap that people go into, where you go into like these dead end academic jobs, research jobs, where you're not actually doing any research. You're just sort of like, it's not managing, but you're sort of.
No, I like obviously the only like analogies and like thing that I've got from it once again is always going to be about kitchens. Do you know what I mean? But it is kind of the application of if like you're not going out there into the real world, i.e., you're not applying yourself to different kitchens, different.
You need a problem solve,
different things, and putting yourself in these positions to be able to learn from other people, to see other applications, see how other people are doing things, and once again being able to bring that back and going, right, well, actually, I'll take this part, I'll take this part, this works, this doesn't work, do you know what I mean? Then you might as well just be like a head chef sat in an office, do you know what I mean? Not ever actually step into the kitchen, or like an executive chef that just runs numbers, do you know what I mean?
Completely.
Because that's essentially what you're doing.
Growth, like we were saying earlier on, I guess, is probably, like, that's what I think it is. Like, academics often stop the growth side of things. They hyper focus on academic side of things, writing and thinking, but they don't then get out and do, okay, this is the real world, and this is where my research can tie in, and this is where I can have more
when the
impact.
Research should be tied in now.
Exactly.
When it should be applied now, not in 15.
They don't get involved in any of the conversations. Totally.
Because I think, once again, from an outside perspective, I think this is where a lot of negative connotation when it comes to like cannabis, when it comes to like THC and CBD, that's where the negative connotation is coming, because there's not enough people applying what they know to actual practical theory. Instead, it's once again, we'll hold on to this information until it can kind of go to the right people, or to we think it's the right people. And in most terms, it's who's giving you the most money, who's going to give that university the most money, who's going to give.
Who's going to be funding us next year?
Who's going to be funding us next year? And that's not the right way to.
Yeah, completely.
So obviously you've seen this gap, you know what I mean? You've seen this gap to be like, right, well, that's not what I want to do. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be sat there crunching numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to be applying myself to speaking to people and to seeing how I can actually get this onto being something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like so you went in your research, you were speaking to these people, and then obviously how did you kind of tailor that towards like what you were doing with finishing university and stuff like that?
So
So like, what
first,
was your final
yeah,
studies?
yeah.
Like, what was your like sort of thesis that you were going into?
So end of the undergraduate was writing up all that gut stuff into a dissertation. I was then able to stay on and do a master's.
So before we jump there though,
Yeah, yeah.
What did you learn about your gut health?
Oh, sure.
Because this is something obviously I've expressed on here before.
Yeah,
like I've got
big time.
like gut problems. I've always got like stuff
1 in 3 do.
So, yeah, most people do. So it'd be nice to kind of like hear what.
Yeah, I probably don't talk about that enough, to be honest. So beyond obviously the wonderful, interesting stuff about cannabis, yeah, there's also a lot of interesting stuff about your physiology, and this also led me on to like looking at, oh shit, what's in the food that we eat, what's in the water that we drink, because you start looking at things at such an analytical level of like how all the outside chemicals that enter our body disturb this little internal environment we've got called the gut, basically. And seeing how, well, going back to why we were looking at cannabis in the gut in the first place, across the world, the biggest area of disease at the moment is really like gut disorders and gut health and obesity and all these things that come from what we put into our bodies, essentially. And the gut becomes like your first everything that goes into your mouth is outside of your body technically until it gets to your gut. That's when your gut starts to take things out and bring it into your blood supply. So most of, let's say, I'm trying to think of what would be a good example. Well, most of the stuff that we put in our body isn't what we think it is for a start. Like, unless you're just eating, let's say, water. Let's start with just water, right? If you're drinking water, no sugar, no bubbles, you're just getting it straight out the tap. That's just water, right?
Well, you think of it as just H2O.
You think of it as just H2O, but there is all sorts of stuff just in that water that you're drinking, and depending on where you are in the world, there's going to be different stuff in that water. Crazy. Not everything in that water is good for you as well. So obviously, to the extreme, you've got places that don't have plumbing, don't have clean and fresh water, and they get ridiculous diseases. There's also different things that we've got in our water that they don't have, like tons of what's the name of the pill? Birth control pills.
Yeah.
All of that ends up in the water supply. The water treatment facilities are for cleaning out feces and dirt and things like that. A lot of the drugs that we consume as a population still remain in the water, so you get like high levels of cocaine in the river.
Yeah, because it's not filtered.
Yeah, you can't filter. So this comes back onto like masks.
Sterilization of everything.
This comes onto like masks and stuff as well. Like, people don't realize how small chemicals, viruses, everything are. They can pass through anything, and we can have all the filters, we can have all the nice cleaning processes in the world, but it's still incredibly difficult to get out all of those like micro, like molecules are minuscule, like beyond even considering how small they are. But because that water looks clean, it's good for drinking. Although the chemicals could be all over the place, and so you get, just thinking about water as a contaminated substance that we drink all the time, you can see how when you interact with the gut and the millions and billions of different, there's more cells in your gut that aren't human in your microbiome than there are human cells in the body.
That's mental.
So you're more bacteria than you are human.
That's where you can see why so many people have problems with it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, how is that? How can you help that? Do you know what I mean?
Try and organize 40 billion
like
different cells. There's trillions of cells in the body. And for a doctor to then go in and say, hey, look, we're going to give you this one pill and I know exactly how it's going to affect your body, it's damn near impossible. If we do it to 1,000 people, we can maybe work out on the most part what's going to roughly happen. But when it comes to me giving you this pill, I can't. I honestly haven't got a fucking clue. And I think that's where medicine and doctors have a bit of a breakdown from the reality of medicine and science and research, is that they take that as sort of like black and white binary information for decision making.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's this massive spectrum of microscopic, macroscopic, biological physics.
Obviously, it's like
There's-
this is going to be a bit of a generalization, but just with what you've said there, like say a doctor giving you one pill or whatever. So during that time, did you find, or is there something like you said? Obviously, we've got like an endocannabinoid system, and was there something within that that you found within like CBD or that you found within like THC that like had like a common theme that kind of worked alongside most people? Whereas, like you said, there's like this one specific drug might only work for one specific type of person that has this specific health condition. Whereas, like obviously, that I guess that's like what you went into, but did you find something that was like, oh,
and I keep wandering off from that topic, Tom, so I appreciate you going back to it.
I'm just as bad, like, don't worry about it. I'll go and touch it.
So essentially,
it's just stuff that I want to know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I totally get you. So like I was saying there with the water, other factors that affect that water and how it affects your body and how much you absorb, how much of the bad stuff in there gets filtered out, depends on how much sleep you've had, depends on how much nutrition you've got of other things, what you've already eaten today, how much exercise you've done, what your body fat percentage is. Like, that's just water.
Yeah, that's not the food.
Well, I'm not factoring in all your foods, all your drugs, all your medications, all the other interventions that the doctors are adding. We really don't. We can't control any of that, and I think medicine's almost like got this illusion of control, like they know what's going on, and we've got it under control because we know, and we've got these binary bits of information that we use. In reality, the average human's so fucking different from the next person that walks in. There's no way you can control anything, because that person, you can have the same person walk into the hospital, into the doctor's clinic with the exact same problem at different times of the day, and they'll get a different result. Yeah. And on a different day, because they've had a shit the morning before, or they've had some coffee or whatever it is, they're going to have a completely different physiological measurement every time you see them. And so imagine every person's coming in thinking, oh, I've got this diagnosis. Well, if you come in at 2 p.m. the next day, you probably have a completely different diagnosis. And if you came in at the next day and had a bit of food, or had a meltdown, or had a binge at the weekend, you're going to have an even different kind of profile. So the way that the NHS is set up is that it's like got to balance cost efficiency with practical science, essentially. And what is become more cost efficient and unscientific is what I see as like I'm nobody, but as someone that's gone through the learning processes and seen how it all works and how it all ties together, what's going on in the clinic and what's being prescribed and what's in the medical guidelines is nowhere near what's in the scientific realms of possibility and the infinite combinations of what really goes on. And so COVID was a great example of how everything was seen as like this binary facts. None of it was facts.
It was like very linear, wasn't it?
Yeah. This is black and white. It's black and white. No, it's all this massive, crazy rainbow of potential, and none of you know what you're talking about at all.
And it's all going to affect people, like you said, in different regions, in different countries, in different parts of the world.
And we're going to give them all an injection that we haven't tested properly. We don't know how it's going to affect every single one of those people right across the world. And so for them to even pretend, it's the biggest lie that you could make up. And there's scientists all across the world now scrutinizing this and calling bullshit, but they just go and they'll target and discredit anyone that speaks out against it. Same for doctors. Oh, we'll just take your license away because you're betraying the establishment in a way.
Yeah, it's like
you're betraying your own people. You guys, we just gave everyone this injection, got paid £10 for every injection we gave, and we don't know how it's going to fucking help or impact our patients. And now we've got
Which I think is quite wild, considering you just said there, like we were talking about before, is most research takes up to like 20 years before it gets into the public eye. So why is that something like that some people can
that's
monetize
fine.
off so instantly was just it like one of those
Shocking.
cases where they go, cool, we can make a lot of money with this. A lot of companies can make a lot of money from this by mass producing this thing around the world. But yet we're definitely not going to give it enough time to kind of resonate and kind of
take it, or we're going to take all your stuff away.
Yeah. And but like
you won't be able to see your grandparents, you won't be able to go to your granddad's funeral, you won't be able to go to work, we'll take your job away. Australia separated parents from the kids for not taking the vaccine. They put them in
crazy, isn't it? Like,
jails for it. So with a little bit of bad information getting pushed out through the news, you can turn people into horrible, horrible totalitarian Nazis overnight, basically.
But I guess that's like kind of what we'll get like with getting onto the whole like cannabis situation now, because that's kind of what it used to be like, wasn't it? You know, it used to get pushed into
jail that animal.
Yeah, like you go to jail, like or
proceeds of crime.
Waste, man.
Yeah, completely.
Lazy, you've got no ambition, you've got no desire to do anything. But
I actually have crippling chronic sciatica.
I've actually got like probably gut health problems which relate to mental health problems. Do you know what I mean? Like massively. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, but yet there's no talk about like, oh well, actually it's this psychoactive thing that you're taking that is responsible for this problem. It's like, actually no, it's probably like, have we looked at your stress levels? Have we looked at your sleep levels? Have we looked at what you're actually ingesting on a day-to-day basis? Like, are you getting stuff that is grown organically, or is it got ridiculous amounts of chemicals in it?
Are you just eating McDonald's chips every day?
Are you just eating a McDonald's Big Mac every day? And like, are you actually getting decent nutrition that's going into you? Like, there's none of that is spoken about before.
Because it's too complex and it adds too many variables and it opens up too much of conversation. Everyone likes it skewed on that.
Once again, you said like there's so much potential.
Yeah.
For people to actually go out there and then to learn more about, like the effects of cannabis on other things. Do you know what I mean? Not just the psychoactive effects of it, but like the medical science side of it, where it's like. Because there's not just the medical science side of it. There's so many other things that come behind
industrial plastics,
exactly like that. Like that reduced down on like we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about climate change. We're talking about clothes. Do you know what I mean? Like how sustainable is hemp for making clothes? Like as a food resource. Do you know what I mean? Like eating hemp seeds, like really good for you, really nutritious, like good for your gut health. Like all of these little things that don't ever get spoken about. It's just. Or it's this plant that has got this psychoactive ingredient that will fuck you up. Do you know what I mean?
And everyone that touches it should be put in prison immediately.
Yeah, and like
whoa, how do we get there from it's dangerous? Like dangerous to who?
Like obviously, once again, that was like a mass campaign, especially in like America. Do you know what I mean? Through like the late 70s. So that was a war on drugs. That was a war on drugs. Do you know what I mean? That's where that whole thing. That's where Dare came from. That's where a lot of these things that came into it. So it's kind of nice to see that there is actually like it's been opened up. Especially, I know it's only been probably the past 10 years, really. That it's like actually, you know what? It's not that bad, guys. Like, there is CBD. Which isn't psychoactive. You know what I mean? We've got these endocannabinoid receptors in our own body, so surely if we've got them in there, this is something I've always wanted to know.
Yeah.
If we've got them in there, why would we have them in there if they're not necessary to our body?
Best question ever, Tom. So there's two schools of thinking. There's science is looking at the discovery of the natural laws of the universe. Society is looking at the natural laws of whoever says so, basically. The laws of whoever says so aren't based on anything to do with science, law, magic, nothing to do with reality whatsoever. So, cannabis policy, drug policy, social policy, what we do, you can look at all the statistics and all the facts and all the evidence, and you can see a very clear, logical path of, well, that's how you solve it. Here, you've just got politicians' opinions. I want this, I want that. It just becomes like a power thing, really. Who can enforce it? Who can implement it? And who can get it written onto that piece of paper so that everyone over here has to follow it? Natural science, natural law doesn't care. And the reason we've got the endocannabinoid receptors is in this process of the development of natural life, it seems that so there's sort of like levels that life has had to develop through. So first of all, it's like where's it get its energy from to move and like move around like a blob. So it has to develop a mechanism to move that blob around. Then has to develop a mechanism to okay, we want to create our own food, so we don't have to go and eat things to feed our blob. So that's where sort of like mitochondria supposedly appeared from. Is like because cells needed to live, they almost consumed one genus of cell, or like a mitochondria is like a living power unit on its own, and a cell you're like at this dawn of time must have eaten one of those and gone, oh, if I just keep this inside of me, I can use it as like an internal energy source.
Like a little battery pack.
Basically, so our cells have got this little battery pack in there that's that we then use to have energy inside all of our cells. Trippy in itself. Because the physics of this little organelle generating energy from nothing, light, is pretty incredible. Or oxygen and everything else. So you've got a cell. Those cells go around on their own for a bit. They realize that, oh, hey, we make a pack of cells. We can get quite a lot done if we're a bigger blob of cells working as a unit. They then had to come up with a way of communicating with each other, all of those cells, and that's where some of these cellular communication systems would have had to have come in, and that's where endocannabinoids and cannabinoids would have been evolving from, where cells start to collaborate with each other. So way back before sharks, way back before humans, way back before monkeys and anything like that, dinosaurs even, cells had to develop a mechanism to work together, and they used these things that we now call cannabinoids or endocannabinoids. And so that cannabinoid signaling system has been around for since the dawn of cellular life, basically.
Interesting that, because like obviously don't know a lot into that research, but like my question with that was going to be is it something that we've always
it's always been there in every
something that was like over time, like the whole like mushroom theory, monkeys and stuff like that, developments, like, and obviously that's quite a far-fetched one, but there's I didn't know whether it was something that had like genetically happened over time, like from
consumption
period of consumption, or whether that was just something, because like you said, obviously that's what gives us like it helps with our pain receptors, it's regulates our mood receptors, like all of these sort of things, you know what I mean, within your endocannabinoid system, where it's like, well, surely, like exactly what you've just said, that always had to exist, or that had to have come from the
cells have to collaborate, and that's how they collaborate and communicate. And the same goes to our bodies now. The way all our cells communicate in our body is through little signals that we send and little chemical messages that we send out, and a portion of those are cannabinoids, and cannabis creates those. And arguably, as a survival strategy for the cannabis plant, it helps if you've got stuff that fires off all the buttons in the human or in monkeys or anything else that eats it, basically. So for that reason, you find it in great white sharks, polar bears. Every creature on the planet has cannabinoid receptors in it.
That's crazy. That's something I didn't know. I didn't know.
All vertebrates, anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know whether it was just.
I think they found octopus with them in them, but
that
so it's crazy. So it goes all the way back to like fundamental biology, and then.
But yet we're still denying it.
Well, it's because these people over here have said you can't have it, but they'll smoke it gladly and they'll use it and they'll set companies up.
But that's what I'm saying is, but they're like, whoa, but we're just going to deny this thing that's been like in our evolution for.
And we're going to set up a big business and make loads of money off of it. And you guys put them all in prison for now, and I'll make loads of money off of it for us.
That's crazy.
So coming back round to the law change, that's basically what the law change was for. It was all part of a convenient campaign, a convenient shuffling of people towards, oh, we need law change. Our company then becomes worth billions, we'll sell it, and go live on a private island somewhere, basically. And so all of the politicians, all of the mayors and the sneaky little politicians have basically gone and done that. They've kept all this to themselves. They've commercialized it all, meanwhile keeping everyone criminalized scum.
Because it's only been the past couple of years, hasn't it? Like realistically, what year was it where it actually became like medical, like
2018 was
marijuana.
when they
2018
changed
was
the
it
law to
changed
allow
the
that,
law.
but they
But
didn't expect.
even then, like you said,
Yeah.
it hadn't changed the aspect of, like you said, the black
Still,
market.
yeah, exactly.
Or,
It's
like,
still
anything like that.
criminalized.
Like I,
Yeah.
you know this person as well, and I know someone personally that, like, their mum during that time obviously is suffering from lung cancer. Do you know what I mean? And that was one thing that was helping her out, but yet the doctors and the government weren't willing to do that. So then they were having to go through, once again, another one of our mutual friends.
Science has got to go through the dirty funnel, politics, and all that bullshit before they can give you permission to then go and do what you knew was right in the first place, basically.
And with the idea of the fact that, like, there's so many people in between that process that could kind of get
skew the story, get the information completely wrong, communicate it badly.
Get screwed over as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, if it was just an easier case of going, right, well, obviously this person has got this problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is at least a minimal solution. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something that can help with nausea, that can help prevent potential growth of cells, like things like that. But instead, you're going to have to go through this friend, this friend, this friend, who then has to get it from this website or this person. Do you know what I mean? And so now you're putting like 4 or 5 people at risk.
Yeah.
Potential fines, jail time, like,
all to help someone out as well.
All to help someone out, and
and
none of it is like, oh well, I'm doing this because I want to make money or because I'm thingy, which is like the total opposite to what we're talking about with, like, government greed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if this information was available, if this stuff was available for people to actually make their own conscious decision on, and then the doctors as well, do you know what I mean? To go, actually, you know what? We support you in this. We support you in this research, and we support you in you actually going, yeah, you know what? You can try this, try this.
Yeah, give it a go.
Try this. Do you know what I mean? This one's we've been doing it for 20 years. Doesn't work. You know what I mean? Try this, and then there wouldn't be so much, like you said, like, negative connotation on it. Do you know what I mean? Because there'd be more willing and more openness of conversation between scientists, between doctors, between patients, between government, between, like, everybody. Do you know what I mean? It would become more, instead of, like I said, it's only been a 6-year period, and that's only because they're, once again, the government and people within that.
It's only moving at the pace that they want it to move at.
Exactly. And that's not fair. Like, that's not fair. So you must see things within that. Do you know what I mean?
Like, it's so annoying, Tom. Honestly, mate. Like, yeah.
Right. So we're a little break. Kind of before, we were just talking about. It was kind of a generalization of everything, wasn't it? We were talking a little bit about, like, where you kind of started within cannabis research, and, like, the reasons why, obviously, like, your gut health, like the correlations to. We didn't really massively get into the correlations to what cannabis does. I guess one of the reasons why, like, I wanted to chat more to you about marijuana, about weed, about cannabis, do you know what I mean, was more about, like, the health benefits of it. So, like, obviously it's got, once again, we've said the negative connotations, the psychoactive effects. Obviously I want to get in the myth busting side of it, which is, once again, the psychoactive side, the psychosis, the things that people stereotypically think about when it comes to, or used to think about when it comes to cannabis. But obviously there's been studies since then which kind of show otherwise. Do you know what I mean? It shows that more so if you generally tend to suffer from mental health problems to start with, that it's probably not going to help in some circumstances, but then there's other circumstances where it can massively help, depending on what you have. Do you know what I mean? What you're struggling with, what you're trying to cope with, what you're trying to do. So, I guess one of the things I was going to ask was, like, how would you define it? Like, how would you define cannabis? Like, what, if you could? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's its purpose? Like, what would you define its best purpose as?
Right. So I think, depending on who you are and what your problem is, fundamentally everyone's going to be ill at some point in their life, and the more tools you've got in your diagnostic toolkit for counteracting that misery when you do get to become ill, whether it be at the end of your life or you have a disease or a broken leg or a new Achilles that you need to get, we're really limited at the moment by the tools that we've got in the existing medical system. Outside of the medical system, it's an absolute fruitcake basket because there's all sorts of different ideas and theories that people have. So I see the benefits of the medical system going, again, just speaking fundamentally. But the role cannabis, I think, plays is that it's just a whole new toolkit that we wouldn't have had access to before. And at the moment, we're dispelling the incredibly serious, life altering potential that it has because of some people over at parties and at different festivals like to get high. I don't give a shit personally. If people want to go get high, that's up to them. But
Well, obviously,
that
there's
doesn't
like,
mean we shouldn't overlook all the
I was going to say though, like,
valuable stuff, in my
like
opinion.
I was going to say from that though, with you saying about people going to like festivals and people going to parties and people basically essentially using it recreationally, is at the end of the day, like we've spoke about this like off camera and stuff like that anyway. Like obviously people like to have a beer. Do you know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
it's the same thing. It's the same thing that's classified
yeah,
as a
yeah,
drug. Do you know what I mean? It's it might changes your mind. It alters your state. Do you know what I mean? We actually spoke about the fact that it's probably actually cheaper to buy weed on the black market than it actually is to buy a beer from a pub these days, which is crazy. Do you know what I mean? Because it was like total opposite, or should be the total opposite anyway. But with you saying about like people going to like, because it isn't just the medicinal side of it. Like there is spiritual sides of it, there is habitual sides of it, there is like cultural
yeah,
sides of
yeah,
marijuana. Do you know what I
100%.
mean? That come from thousands of years of history. Do you know what I mean? Through different cultures, through different parts of the world. Do you know what I mean? That have used it for different things. Like you said, we spoke before about people using it for clothes, for hemp. Do you know what I mean? Like using the hemp, so it's not actually using anything to do with psychoactive
Yeah, yeah,
product.
yeah, yeah.
Like it's got nothing to do with that. And yeah, like I just find that, like with you saying there about the whole opening it up as a toolbox for this new sort of way of thinking when it comes to medicinal science. Like you mentioned about snapped Achilles, obviously I snapped my Achilles. I'm not gonna lie to you, without consumption of of cannabis throughout that time, I would have been in so much excruciating pain regardless of the pain medication that I was getting put on,
Yeah,
because at
yeah,
the end of the day, it's such a large thing in my body. Do you know what I mean? It's one of the
yeah,
largest
yeah,
like ligaments in your
yeah, yeah,
body
yeah.
that it completely detached itself. So I could feel every fiber wanting to come back together when I'm trying to sleep. Not only that was the painkillers that I was getting put on and the blood thinners that I was getting put on were giving me serious constipation.
Mm.
So like I was struggling to eat, struggling to go to the toilet, which was making me feel sick, which was making me feel nauseous, which wasn't helping me with my other pains. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So then the only thing that was actually helping me through it was cannabis. Realistically, do you know what I mean? During that time, it was like, right, well, this is actually one tool that is actually guiding me through this thing, because even with all these things that I'm getting medicinally from the hospital, from the doctors, is actually messing me up in other ways. Do you know what I mean? Because I've got, once again, digestive problems, I've got gut health issues. And then when you start adding like tramadol, codeine, like basically things that are going to block up your intestines, you know what
yeah,
I mean, are going to make you
yeah, yeah,
struggle to. And also, I'm getting put on painkillers, which are supposed to be essentially stopping the pain receptors, which I think during the same time was also stopping connective tissue within my gut,
sure.
within everything else, from telling it to move in the way that it should, from doing what it's supposed to do. So, like, yeah, there's just so much more.
It's not binary, is it? It's not
No,
linear in any
there's
way.
so many other aspects to it, which I just find, like I said, which is why I wanted to get you on. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
yeah,
talk about it, because it's like it's not so straightforward. It's not so black and white. It's not so. It's not just to do with like, oh well, actually it's the psychoactive properties or it's the medicinal like CBD
yeah, yeah.
properties. It's like everything else like that's in between that.
It is like a whole toolkit basically, and like depending on the setting that you're in, the toolkit's useful for different things. Like I guess science is our toolkit in a way as a society, and we've just decided that one ancient piece of it, one part of nature is so taboo that we can't touch it, and we'll never touch it even if it has benefit. And again, we were talking earlier on how it's not who decides what's allowed
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily care what the facts are, what the science are. It's I'm in charge. That's what's happening. And I think what we're maybe seeing is that, like, well, everyone's definitely realizing life isn't binary or linear. Like,
No.
so many options, so many questions, and I can see again the reason why we go down the route we do with politics and medicine, in that it can be very rigid in its our way of sort of controlling things. But the fallacy is, I don't think you can control most of those things. And in reality, if you're trying to individually, you can control more than you can control at mass. And I
Yeah.
think that's where medicine again falls down, in that for one very small part of the country, or one, it's maybe 50 people decide who and what becomes medically allowed. They've got to make that decision based on millions of people in their own country. So I think we've got to understand that there's going to be a certain degree of, that's not going to be perfect,
Yeah.
but in every other field we seem to accept that, oh yeah, that's fine, and obviously there's going to be mistakes. But in politics, unquestionable black and white truth, and then when you put the law behind it, that's when it gets really serious. And I think what we're seeing now is how back to front our whole drug policy is, because it looked at this very binary level of all use is evil.
Well,
And now we're at the phase where we've stepped back and gone, oh well, actually all use is evil, but not this medical bit, as long as we're charging people lots of money for it.
well, I think during that time as well, obviously, when we were talking before about like sort of 2018, and obviously the drugs policy changing. Obviously, we live in a region in the northeast, where it was kind of quite nice to see like local government and local councils and local police departments kind of taking more of like a US approach on their how they govern things. So obviously in Durham they had the head of police, I think
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
police commissioner,
yeah,
who
yeah.
basically had said like, well, I'm not going to follow everything that you're trying to tell me in regards to these rules and
What you're telling me in
regulations.
London doesn't match up with what's practical
Exact.
here in the
No,
northeast.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly that. Do you know what I mean? Like you've obviously got a problem due to this, and this. That is slight correlation to these drug
yeah,
problems.
yeah,
But overall, you've got a way bigger problem, and that doesn't match with the problem that we've got.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? And therefore,
Completely.
also, like local governments and local council are almost entirely underfunded. Do you know what I mean? So the expectation of what the the government is trying to tell you to do in
With
regards to
what
the
you've got
law and
here
what
on the
you've got
ground.
here
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
ground are two totally different
yeah,
things.
yeah.
So I can't have
Completely.
patrol cars going out and arresting people for having a 20 bag of weed, like
Yeah,
a 2 grams of weed or whatever. Like that's not feasible for us to do so because that's going to cost us more in taxpayers' money. That it's just
and I've
irrelevant.
also got all these people with machetes that I need to
Yeah,
chase down as well. So which one do I go for?
yeah, like which one's more priority
Which
here?
is
Do you
more of
know
a
what I
harm?
mean?
Yeah,
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 which was
completely.
kind of nice to see that in like certain districts and certain
Yeah, yeah,
places in the country. They were like, actually, you know what? I see what you're saying, but I'm not going to take your stand on this. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, I respect it to some degree, but at the same time, like, it's more beneficial for us to put our money, resources, and effort into something that is actually more harmful. Do you know what I mean? To the society and the community as a whole, not chasing down some like 16, 17 year
Yeah,
old on a
yeah.
street corner who's
Or some
smoking
old
a
bloke in
joint.
his
Do you
back
know what I
garden.
mean? Or some old bloke. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like,
Completely.
it's mad. Or once again, like, kind of we spoke about it with the whole like friends and distributing to people that have got actual medical problems that like aren't being addressed in the way that possibly should be,
Yeah, yeah,
because of
yeah.
these connotations that have been had on how negative it can be. um like we've spoken about before, obviously I want to talk about the benefits of it, but like like you'll be able to confirm this or deny it, but or just give a bit more insight into it. But like one of the biggest things is we've spoken about epilepsy and we spoke about other stuff, but
Mm.
is cancer.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? The amount
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
research that like probably
Big time.
should have gone into it prior to now. Do you know what I mean?
Arguably, probably has gone into it as well before it
Yeah,
got shelved
yeah.
and
Well, obviously this is something that I don't know. Do
removed.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's
yeah,
something that you're definitely going
yeah,
to know
yeah,
more
yeah.
about. But yeah, like
Yeah, yeah.
money and effort and resource that could have been put into that, which could have essentially saved people's lives, could have prevented a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Because as far as I know, and any sort of readings that I've done into it is And once again, personal experience, seeing people we know, do you know what I mean, that have gone through very, very difficult
Mm.
positions, and the only thing that's actually helped them has been RSO oil,
Yeah, yeah,
like, which is crazy. Do you know what I mean? This
big
one
time.
simple thing
That anyone could make.
that anyone could make,
Yeah,
and it's like, and yet they still don't even want to like necessarily monetize on that
yeah, yeah,
either. Do you know what I mean?
big
It's like,
time.
yeah, I just find the whole
The cancer
as
conversation's an interesting one because, like, going back to everything we've said about environment and how much that impacts your health, most of Western society, what we eat, how we treat ourselves, the lifestyles we live, is all geared towards giving us cancer.
yeah, and it's
Whether
all,
that's intentional, arguably not,
it's probably
but
not
by
it's not intentional, but it's manufactured by
yeah, it's
commercialism.
it's a product of our own ecosystem that we built. So what you see in going back to the gut, if you look at it at a population level, a lot of the gut disorders and cancers are very much a Western phenomena and issue. You don't see them outside of Africa or well anywhere in Africa really. No one's got gut disorders. Well, for different reasons.
Yeah, obviously, but yeah, but we're talking about when we talk about gut
Developing
disorders.
into colorectal cancer, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah. Instead you're talking about stuff that would be like more like dysentery because
Yeah,
of
yeah.
like poor water, poor whatever. Do you know what I mean? So it's outside sources that are
We have
affecting
a
the
new
body, not
generation
inside. So
completely
yeah,
modern diseases that don't exist anywhere else. China had it for a little while because they had a big like smoking was huge in China. Everyone loved smoke.
yeah,
But in the West, most of the gut disorders that we have come primarily, and you can trace this over like history and out throughout the population. We've got all the maps, all the data, all the public health info, and you can see how new foods, new medicines, new lifestyle factors that people try cause an uptick in disease behind that,
yeah,
and specifically cancers, ADHD, autism. Like this doesn't exist outside of the West, basically, and it's very much. It seems due to like we live a very synthetic life. Most of, let's say, Eastern Europe, for example, they haven't got power cables all over the place. They don't have concrete everywhere. They live on a farm in the middle of nowhere, drink their own milk, eat their own
yeah. They've
cows.
got their own farms. They've got
Everything
their
is
own
from where they
agriculture.
are when they get it. Everything we get, we don't know where anything comes from, and we live in a place where we're very disconnected from the environment around us. Really,
Yeah,
most
massively.
people in like in Middlesbrough, no one's going to know how the farmland works. No one's going to know how the water drainage works, the water systems, the food systems, the storage, the infrastructure. Most people won't have a clue how any of that works. They're just sort of like victims of that. They're just going along with it. They're
Yeah.
born into it, and you don't really know. Most people born into it have no idea how we've got here.
Obviously, we're quite fortunate in that sense because obviously that's something you study, and then obviously
Yeah,
in
massively.
my field
Yeah,
of
yeah,
work, I
exactly.
come from like looking at local farming,
Supply
local
chains.
agriculture, supply chain. So like obviously I have to look into that in terms of distribution, where my stuff's
Yeah,
coming from, how like. But even then, I'm still blinded to it. Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like you work for a most of the time you work for a company, they pick from a supplier. That supplier will get it from somewhere. That place will
they'll
get it.
tell you something.
Yeah,
We'll tell
yeah.
them something.
Yeah, so you're never actually getting like the right information. Do you know what I mean? Unless you're getting it from the source,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is from that
yeah,
farm.
yeah. And then
And
who's done the research as well?
yeah,
So honestly, it's an absolute hodgepodge. And like when you start looking at disease, where that comes from, how that generates, you realize that basically we're all Western society and our process of living in towns, getting everything through these big supply chains, processing everything, taking all these, injecting all these things into our bodies. None of us know where any of it comes from, how any of it works, and computers, cameras. We all use phones. There's not probably less than 1% of people that own a phone actually know how a phone works and could tell you reliably
no, I definitely couldn't.
the mechanics of the phone, the computer chip inside it, nothing like that. And so I think
And that's just one small
using
item
that
that you could find the information on online very easily. That's not
completely,
every single thing that you're
completely,
consuming throughout your entire life. Like,
completely. The blankets you rub,
yeah,
the makeup you use. Nobody knows how their phone works, and they use that every day. Nobody knows what's in their deodorant. Nobody knows what's in their food. Nobody knows what's in their water and where it comes from. Compared to the farmer who lives in the middle of nowhere. Oh yeah, I got the water from there this morning. I chopped that cow down this morning. We got the milk this morning, we got the eggs this morning, and I grew all the potatoes and carrots that we could possibly need. The comparison between the two, like, is the environment, and our Western environment is just riddled with disease. Like, it's the worst possible. We inhale fumes from cars. We sit in dark rooms where we get no sun. We wear clothes that maybe or may not leach chemicals into our body. We'll drink water that's maybe got all sorts of other drugs in it that we don't know. The list goes on. We don't sleep. We're overstressed. Worried about work. Don't see our kids. Whatever it is. Oh, everyone's got cancer. Why is that happening? Well, that's exactly the reason. And we go around in circles trying to create all these new treatments, create all these new drugs, and that's what the corporations are basically monetizing our own ignorance. And I think really by and what we've been alluding to and what I sort of see is that the more information an individual has and the more autonomous taking your own responsibility and logical individual thinking, you realize that most of what you're being told is absolute garbage, and why would you listen to them in the first place when you're seeing one thing, we can all see there's a big fire there, but the government's telling us that, oh no, that's not a fire, that's just some piece of policy, or oh, this minister needs to do that, whatever it might be. We could have just fought that fire and put some water on that fire, turned it out, whereas they've got to make a whole policy department to discuss it, revise it, create new technologies and refine it, spend loads of public money, and then maybe you get someone that will come and piss on your fire rather than put it out, if you know what I mean. So
it's basically kind of like what you're saying there is kind
think
of
for yourself, or outsource your thinking to the monstrosity that doesn't know what's going on in the first place. And I think that's all we're doing at a community level, health level,
like on a medical
business
level,
and all we need to do is like what I'm trying to do is now put all that information into a video, but then get everyone to sit and watch a video. Good luck.
yeah.
Because there's all these shiny things over here. So it's really people come to you with a problem, but then you've got to sort of show them, well, look, all these things that you're doing, everything that's brought you to me today with your complaint is probably what's wrong, and we'll go back, trace through what you've done that's maybe causing you to be the way you are now. Most people don't sleep. Most people take too many crazy caffeine drinks, drink so much shit, don't drink any water. I love a Monster every now and again. Sacrilege, I know, but
I done yesterday.
guilty pleasure, energy drinks, stimulants, things like that. We're all overstimulated. We're all undernourished. We're all underslept. We're all dehydrated, overabsorbed, and probably dopamine addicted for the most part of people. And so, like, there's nowhere in the social structures where we can sort of interrupt that at a young age, and you've really got to teach kids at school that about the environment that they live in. We teach them about worms and chickens, and oh, this is where the worm comes from. That's how you catch the fly. The butterfly transforms into this, but you learn about everything but your own environment. I think that's the difference really. We're very disconnected from our environment and unaware of our own environment, and that's the biggest thing at the moment. Is like, whoa, who'd have thought if I was in a drug-riddled street with decrepit poverty and everyone's a drug dealer that I might become a drug dealer or homeless or something like that.
It's environmental.
Completely environmental, and it's that our drug policies, everything governmentally dictated to us is almost the problem a lot of the time, because all the scientists, all the researchers are here going, the facts are here. Look, we need to do this. We need to do this. Politician, whoever's in charge, goes, oh, we're going to do that, and
it kind of goes to show you like how sort of we were talking about this in the break, but like sort of how undemocratic like our government is. In terms of,
I don't think anyone feels they get a voice
in terms of our individualism. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't. So like, well, it's kind of good. There's obviously people like you, though. Do you know what I mean? Who want to advocate for stuff like this. Do
Not
you know what I
many
mean?
of me though.
In terms, no, there isn't. There really isn't. But people that actually want to advocate, because obviously we'll get into what you do specifically. Well, I guess that's kind of what I want to get into. Actually, is like kind of what you do specifically. So when you're talking about obviously what you do as a career within cannabis, obviously we're talking about medicinal side of things, but like obviously you saying you put together like packages and stuff like that. Obviously you've got sort of multiple companies within it that do different things. Do you know what I mean? So I'm guessing obviously one's more of like the medicinal side of it, which is talking about like the like the health benefits of it when it comes down to the microbiology side.
Yeah.
And then obviously, with you speaking there, I'm guessing the other side of it is talking about the environmental aspect of it, what can be done around like your other circumstances. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then
Completely.
obviously like where cannabis fits into that, I guess. So yeah, I'll ask you a quick question,
Yeah, mate.
and then I want to get into some myth busting things.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Cool.
So on a whole, obviously, I've got you on. We've been talking about like many different things to do with cannabis, like its health benefits, its negative connotations, obviously government regulations, like the disparity between like science and government, like how long it takes for government to kind of push these things through. Um, but on a whole, we've not spoke about what it is you do within the
Oh
field
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Obviously, we had like a little brief talk about like how you got into the industry, but what is it like? How what do you do on a whole? Like within like what do you
Yeah.
specialize in? Do you know what I mean? Like what's your field? How what do you work on? What are you trying to do to engage people and like what's your end goal? Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of your businesses.
Basically, the company's all about science and the way. So after everything we've talked about there, the problems that I've sort of outlined, the sort of solution that I thought would be the best approach would be to set up like a science company essentially that works on addressing those issues, but in a different sort of way of services. So at the moment, and initially, there's a bit of a sort of timeline of thinking as to how it
Well, obviously,
went.
with you saying that, like the initial services aren't working, are they? Do you know what I
No,
mean?
no,
In
yeah,
terms
yeah.
of like you getting that information, giving that information to someone in the lab, them either sitting on it, doing whatever they need to do, but then it's not getting passed to whoever it needs to get passed to, or it's not getting acknowledged in the way that you wanted to. So that was your avenue, was to go, actually, you know what? I'm cutting that part out,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially.
Essen- You've described it better than I've done, full stop, ever, Tom. So that gap I saw there was between sort of like science and the public, but then there's also a huge gap as I saw by speaking to tons and tons of cannabis companies, investors, politicians, parents, everything in between. They didn't know any of the science either. So they were having the same problems as the people on the front line who were worried about their health. The businesses don't have a clue either, and they're trying to advise people on their health or
And they're
make.
just getting told what they're just trying to tell people what the government's told them, but it's actually
Yeah,
old information
yeah,
or
exactly,
misinformation.
exactly. So all of those businesses are 20 years, 30 years behind where the science is up to. So essentially, the purpose of the company is to connect that latest science and information with those who need it. The public first of all, then businesses and investors, and then um, really other scientists, and work with scientists to bring more.
More traction,
Yeah,
more
because
understanding from other people.
there's maybe 5, 10 people tops in the UK that have done any sort of cannabinoid research into humans. There's lots of people that maybe studied the crop or the plant, but then actually having looked at the endocannabinoid system or like just done all the measurements and see how the body reacts and what goes on. Very few, just because it's been so taboo, no one wanted to touch it basically.
And it also, I can imagine it's something that's going to be hard to get funding into,
Yeah.
into doing the
Ethics.
research.
Oh,
Do you
we're
know what
not
I mean?
doing
Like
that at this
everything that goes
university.
behind it. Yeah,
Completely.
exactly.
So I found like even just doing my masters and doing my undergraduate degree, I was getting loads of grief from surgeons that were around the hospital or doctors that didn't agree with it, or had to submit an ethics form to say, hey, look, we're going to go collect these tumors from patients, and they were like, oh, you can't give patients cannabis. Like, you obviously haven't read the fucking documents. That's not what it's about at all.
Yeah.
But the second you mention cannabinoids, cannabis, everyone's red flag's gone off and all rational thinking's gone out of the way. It's like they're reporting you to the teacher immediately before they even know what the. They're so scared of getting in trouble,
Yeah,
they've not even
they
read that there is any trouble in the first place anyway, or even understood what was going on. So I spent like 6 months just waiting to get ethical approval from non-medical people to tell us that it was okay to do
medical research.
medical research, basically.
That's crazy. It's like Yeah.
Honestly,
People that don't actually have
bureaucracies.
a
Yeah,
clue
yeah,
about
yeah,
anything
yeah.
to do with this going, well, so that's basically getting passed from pillar to book until someone
Completely.
goes,
No one's going to make a decision.
yeah,
Just
go on then.
get it done. Yeah, exactly. So that's on a massive level wherever you go at every university. So it's really what it's difficult to get research done. It's difficult to get the funding for it, and it's difficult to communicate that to people as well. So the whole process is just no one knows what they're talking about for the most part. So going back to then what I decided to set up as a company was I ended up doing lots of article writing, getting information for people, doing presentations, stuff like that. I realized I was having the same chunks of information that people needed in order to start understanding what was going on. And so during COVID, I wrote it into a book, and then between after COVID and now, I turned it into a training. So the books, no one likes to read, and it's very intense, condensed, and I can't get everything into it.
I guess obviously that's for like a different demographic though, isn't it? Obviously
That's for the
that's more
general
of the,
public. Yeah, yeah,
like obviously like having a book as well is probably going to be more towards like someone that wants more informative information, like the full length
yeah,
detail
yeah.
before they get
Is everything
into
that's going
everything,
on.
yeah. Whereas obviously breaking it down into segments where someone can actually like go, oh, actually yeah, that
That's the
makes
bit I
sense,
want.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I chopped into these trainings essentially, and so some are suitable for training cannabis company teams. Some are suitable and best designed for an investor. Some are better for the business owner who's got to make strategic decisions about, okay, well, what direction do I take this company? Here's the research. Here's everything you need to know. Use that as your map, basically. So create like a mental model for businesses and investors to be able to go, whoa, okay, this is everything that's going on. We need to be doing that, and we'll handhold them in deciding what they need to do, how they need to do it, and what and who they need to get there. So we've got
Yeah,
all the
like
tech,
the
all the tools,
network
all the
and
people to get them there. Um,
so what's your company called? Which
so
one?
the company is Global Cannabinoid Solutions, and under Global Cannabinoid Solutions, there's three branches essentially. So there's globalcannabinoidsolutions.com, which is consulting, which is basically like we'll do it for you rather than you come and learn everything.
Yeah, we'll do the work
Fill
that you
this
need
form out,
and
we'll assess you, and we'll tell you what you need to do. What I realized quickly was that okay, we can tell you what you need to do, but you still haven't got a clue what you're talking
yeah,
about.
you
So
still
we
won't
need
do
to
it.
get you to do some training. So I turned that basically a whole degree's worth of time and energy and attention from all the conversations I've had, all the research I've done, all the scientists I've spoken to, politicians, police, everything into one training course essentially. Um, so it's 10 hours of 10,000 hours of research and science in cannabis into 10 hours of training. So you can do it in one day if you're a savage.
It's a lot of information.
it, you'd have to be well if you're a
It's
high
like
flying executive and you've not got much time. You've got one plane journey from Newcastle to Hong Kong or something. I'll bash that out.
it's like hundreds to thousands of different people's like research and like everything put into one though, isn't it? Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
To
yeah.
break
You
it and
don't have to
break it
do
down. Do you know what I
anything.
mean? Like you've broken that down. You've like
It's like
to a
10
manageable.
years, 8 years of research condensed into a mental model of what you need to know. So while I was doing that, I was thinking, oh, it'd be really interesting to make one of these for medicine because medicine's a really long course, and I wonder if you could condense that down into. I hope someone goes and does this, but an intensive 10-hour medical experience where you learn everything you need to know about medicine in 10 hours rather than. It just got me off thinking about what else could you do in 10 hours? What other courses
To
can
be
you do in
fair
10
though,
hours?
yeah, like what
Could you become a master chef in 10 hours with the most intensive, brutal training? It took me 6 months to make it, but if you can just watch one video, this is everything you need to know about fucking cooking the best damn dish of your life.
Yeah, to be fair, if
From
it
the
was
fundamentals of flavors through to the
yeah.
piecing together. Obviously, you'd still mangle it and need some practice, and we've got coaching for that.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, isn't it? It's I was going to say there within your training, it's not like it's like that's it and that's all you're getting from it from
Yeah,
each
it's a
thing.
full
It's
hand-holding
yeah, it's like
experience,
it's
basically.
broken down through each point. Do you know what I mean? So it's like not like you could just bash it out in 10 hours, because theoretically you're going to want to, the first half an hour you sat there looking at like the history of it, do you know what I mean, going through, and you're going to want to break that down, and then obviously like you're going to go into these different
You might
sections, do
want
you
to
know what
go
I mean,
do
like
more reading
yeah,
after each bit.
exactly, in each bit, because there might be a certain part that which kind of really hones into what you
Yeah,
want to do as like I said, as a scientist, as a business, as an investor, as whichever field that you want to kind of
completely. Yeah,
cover
yeah.
across your aspect. um yeah, that's, there's not many people doing what you do. Do you know, like there's
There's
not at
literally no
all.
one in
Like
the UK doing it.
there's
Yeah,
nobody. Like you said, there's like what, like a handful of people that are like sort of trying to advocate for this to some respect. It's like it's not even like you're advocating for it. Do you know what I mean? You just see that there's like this field that's not.
There's all this research done, and you guys should know about it.
Yeah,
And then
it's
how
not
do you give the
recognized.
best
It's not
info? Yeah,
recognized enough. Do you know what I mean? That's the problem with it. Is like the information is there, but it's not recognized that it's
yeah, yeah.
there. It's not being openly available, and that's kind of what you're doing. Is just going, well, it is, but like,
Just got
here's
to
the
sit down for
easiest way to
5 minutes. Yeah,
find out,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
find it. Do you know what I mean? Which is absolutely class. Um, so obviously, once you got these businesses and stuff like that, and you're sort of, what is it within? Sorry, let me get this right. When you're speaking to people and like, is it, I'm guessing it's like universities, is it like
Actually, not that
medical,
many
is it
universities
not,
at the moment.
is it like medical researchers and those types of things, or is it like what,
Medic. Yeah.
I was just gonna,
Sorry.
and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was just gonna ask, like, what is it that like you kind of specifically go into with businesses? Do you know what I mean? Like, what types of businesses is it that you kind of tailor this to?
Mainly, and it's changed over the times. Initially, it was all, well, the only companies that were around were CBD companies. So for them, it was, okay, how do we know what product to make? How do we know what's the best? What's going to be most useful to our consumers? And can you help us make some educational information? So that's sort of how the conversation started. Oh, Chris, can you do some articles? Can you get some of this written for us? Oh, Chris, we've got this new testing. What do you think of this? Which one of those do you think is better? And so it became like a full sort of just decision making. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I was doing that with too many people basically. I said, look, guys, why don't I just train you on it? And so I was doing one-to-one trainings for them to work out what they needed, and then from there, so fuck this. Rather than do all these one-to-one and scrambling my brain, I'm gonna make one standard course that if you work with me, you just need to know this. Otherwise, you're wasting my time, you're wasting your time, and you're wasting your company's and business time as well. So going back to boundaries, I had to sort of draw that boundary of like, well, you're not even talking the same language as me if you haven't done this course. Like it'd be like you trying to explain to someone that's never cooked before how to make the most gourmet.
Yeah, it's like every time you're having to repeat yourself, and you know that like if they're having to do it from the beginning every single time, that it's, they're never going to be on the same page as you. Like, so it's like
Completely,
you're having to restart the process every single time.
completely. So I've had to get, basically what the company's become is a training process, a process for people to get from wherever they are with whatever problem they've got through to understanding where they need to be, where they need to go, and then I'll help them get there when they can see it. But what I found was that if you're doing consulting, it becomes sort of, depending on if your client's right for you, you end up taking on all of their deficiencies almost. Like if you're not filtering who you work with better, then you end up with people that are taking all your time and offering
Yeah,
you
and they're not
nothing.
getting anything
And
back.
like, man, I can't turn around. I'm here to give advice to you to help you solve your problems, not for me to solve all of your life's problems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, massively.
And um, so that was a big that thought process as you go through as well. But it mainly now, owners of businesses that are in cannabis already, I want to move away from those mainly because there's loads of them. There's not many there. It's high turnover. Lots of them fail. Lots of them come back. Lots of them maybe don't care as much as
Yeah,
they say they do. And then also,
it definitely becomes more of a profitable thing than a
yeah,
like
yeah,
if they
yeah, yeah.
like I think
They're
we
not doing
spoke
it for the
about this
same
before.
reasons
Yeah,
or
like
values or anything.
so they actually don't really care about the information that you've got to
Yeah,
give them because they're actually just seeing it as a quick buck
yeah, yeah,
rather than like,
yeah.
actually this is
Completely,
something informative that we want to help people with and
completely,
like, understand the reasons why. But
completely. So again, more differentiating with who I actually work with and do more due diligence on the person before they come in and go, okay, well look, I know you've got a background in this. I know you know these people. This is how you got professional background, and we've got something we can play with there, rather than you've never done anything before. You just come to me and gone, I've got an idea, great, cool, but what's your plan? What you doing? How far are you into it? Um,
so do you work with a lot of like medicinal companies at all? Or
mainly now it's newcomers to the cannabis industry. I want to catch people before they go into the misinformation pool because it's far easier to catch people that are fresh,
I guess, yeah.
willing to learn, not people that have gone in, indoctrinate themselves in some
Well, I was going to say, from everything
myth
you've been
bullshit.
talking about through the podcast, it would kind of be a little bit redundant for you to kind of try and change the minds of those that are already corrupt or that are already misinformed, like to that degree. If it's something that, like, say, it's a large company that is already,
We want to exploit it, but we don't want to help people that are actually affected by it. Well,
yeah,
I can't really help you then
yeah, you
because
can't help.
I'm not going to
Whereas,
help you exploit them further.
which which I suppose is, I guess, is going to be a lot more fulfilling for you as like a career path as well, is kind of getting on board with these people that have the same vision and same
yeah, yeah,
alignment as
yeah,
you,
yeah, sure,
rather than you trying to change people's
exactly,
vision,
exactly,
because that's so much harder to do than it
completely.
is to go, actually, you know what, me and you think the same, but and I've got information that can help
Yeah,
you
yeah.
to help this grow, and then you've got this person that that can kind of, do you know what I mean? Like
Has
it
a net
becomes,
positive effect
yeah,
rather than
exactly, rather than
contributing to the downturn of society,
yeah,
basically.
and you digging yourself a hole
Yeah.
trying to better it in a way that's not going to work at all. Like,
But everyone's doing that in their own sort of way, really, aren't they?
yeah, I guess they are, like, individually, especially if you care about like certain things, like you were talking about with like food, and like if you
Yeah.
kind of care about like local farming, if you care about that sort of stuff. As long as people are working on things individually in their own way, do you know what I mean? It definitely helps a lot. But obviously, it is harder to change the masses mind than it is to
Oh,
change an
yeah,
individual's
yeah,
mind, isn't it?
yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? And obviously, that's
Most
how you
people don't
kind of
want
need
to
to
change
step.
their minds either, though.
No,
Like,
exactly. Um,
mm.
so that's what you do, is basically you go into, like, you work with existing companies that are like new starting up companies that are kind of looking into the world of cannabis, into looking into like not just the monetary side of it, but like the beneficiary, like the medicinal side of it, the um and I guess like with that kind of comes slightly a little bit more cultural side as well, in terms of like taking away like the negative thoughts of what it is, or like the control of like our government has over it.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
the
yeah.
more people start thinking about it in a different way, then the less it becomes an issue. Do you know what I mean?
But I think
Like like the less like medical research becomes an issue, the less availability becomes an issue. Do you know what I mean?
I've realised people don't care until it affects them directly.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of the most staunch cannabis haters. I'll never believe in it. Oh, if I see anyone with it, they should be in prison, cut off their heads. Second one of their family members gets ill.
Oh, 100%.
Different game.
Yeah, I've known
But
people personally like that.
everyone's the same. And I think the way you change the masses is you just get more people to realise that at some point, one of you is going to be in excruciating pain on your deathbed or at some point in your life. And would you rather be there going, oh, well, no, because it's cannabis, I don't like that people smoke weed at festivals, to fucking give me that weed right now, my
Yeah.
leg's falling off. And I've met people who've like had amputations, had all sorts of things, and all they never tried anything cannabis related whatsoever. They've had all the opioids, all the fentanyls, all the strongest opioids, and it still feels like they've got their phantom leg and it's being stabbed and cut off, and people are digging knives into the leg. And a bit of weed, some cannabis oil. Holy fuck, I've never had that like stabbing go.
Well, that's the
It's
one
never
thing,
not
like
felt like I was being stabbed.
the one thing I'm
It's
not really
insane.
spoke about on this, and like I guess I've kind of trying to be like swerve
Yeah.
around it in some degree, is like we've been talking about it in terms of like gut health, in terms of like cancer, in terms of like things that can be broken down very like medically in like
Yeah,
I there's pills that you can take for
yeah,
that
yeah.
or whatever else. But I guess the other thing that it doesn't really get spoken about, and obviously I'm not sure if this is something that you kind of like cover as a subject, but is exactly what you've just said there is there's the like, I've been swerving about it because of the whole psychoactive part of it, the whole THC part of it, do you know what I mean?
Have it. Yeah, yeah.
And at the end of the day, like exactly what you've just said there about people that have like lost legs and they've got phantom things. Well, that's post-traumatic stress disorder that is creating that. Do you know what I mean? That is something that within their brain that their brain cannot cope and cannot
Their
understand
nerves are
that.
still
Yeah,
firing like there
it's
should be
still
a leg there
that's
going,
still
holy
firing,
shit, where's the leg
and the
gone?
brain's still
Yeah,
telling it,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah, yeah,
confused.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not firing off on the signals that it should. But once again we were talking about like endocannabinoid systems, and that's a big part of your nervous
Oh, it's huge. Yeah,
systems.
yeah, yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like a massive part of your
Whether you like
nervous
cannabis or
system.
not, you've still got an endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, and that is a big part of your
Yeah, yeah.
nervous system, and within that doesn't just come like you said, it's like the physical medicinal side of it. It comes with the like the mental side of it. My stomach's gone wild here, I don't know
Consciousness.
why,
Yeah, no,
but
I get a bit as well.
yeah, it's like the consciousness of it and the some people it's not going to work for. We spoke about this
For
before. Some
sure.
people it's not going to work for. If you've already got underlying health conditions, i.e., you've got like problems with psychosis, or you've got problems with bipolar disorder, or you've got certain conditions that any mind altering drug is probably not going to help. Do you know what I mean? At all. So
100%.
it doesn't matter whether it's
Yeah,
THC
yeah.
or whether it's anything else. Do you know what I mean? It's probably not going to help. Obviously, there's studies in psilocybin with mushrooms helping people once again with PTSD that have been in the army,
Yeah.
like people that have lost loved ones and that are grieving and that haven't been able to get over it, and so therefore they've had like certain things. But then once again, like cannabis on a whole and like just weed in general like can help with those things as long as you don't over abuse it. Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's the problem with most things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's most things in life. It's the same thing with food, it's the same thing with alcohol, it's the same thing with everything. As long as you don't over abuse anything,
You're going to be all right for
you're
the
going to
most
be all
part.
right,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
probably going to be good for you in the most part.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's the same with fats. Like people think fats are a bad thing. Well, your body needs fats.
Where your
So
hormones come from.
exactly. People think sugar's a bad thing. Well, sugar's not a bad thing. Sugar's a nutrient. Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't be on the nutrient scale. It wouldn't contain fats and saturates if it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? So, like, otherwise it would just be classed as a poison. It wouldn't be in anything.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? But instead, people are monetizing on it. People make happily sell you sweets on a day-to-day basis. You
Yeah,
can go
yeah.
into a shop and
Yeah,
buy
yeah,
20
yeah, yeah.
bags of whatever you want, and no one's going to
Oh, I'm going to have a sugar overdose.
look at
Yeah,
you
yeah.
in a different way. Do you know what I mean? But once again, it's about moderation, and if something makes you feel better about yourself, if something makes you cope in a better way, and it's making you manage your life in an easier way and manage your, like I said, if you've got gut health issues, like for me, it does massively, mate.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? It's like sometimes I can't eat. I don't want to eat. My guts hurt me that much. And I just feel sick and I feel nauseous. And then I go home, I'll self medicate. Do you know what I mean? And then within half an hour, I'm like, I need
Yeah,
to
okay.
eat.
Gonna get
Like
something.
I need to eat. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel a bit more regulated. I feel a little bit like I've settled. My stomach feels a bit more settled. My head feels a little bit more settled because I'm not stressed either. Do you know what I mean? Like
It's interesting because it's almost like so half the there was a few things there you said that super important. Endocannabinoid systems, first of all, everyone's DNA completely unique. That means your endocannabinoid system is completely unique as well. So everyone's got a completely different endocannabinoid system. What works for someone is not going to work for someone else. All cannabis is also completely different. So when
yeah,
you've got a completely different cannabis plant and completely different individuals, you can't really standardize that interaction. So standardizing cannabis medicine is never really going to happen. It's going to have to be more personalized
yeah, to
to
each
the person.
person, and it would be based on like strain and strength and potency, and do you know what I mean? Like that's how it would have to be.
Body weight,
Yeah,
everything. Age, gender, all sorts of stuff. So you've got the DNA in your body, which is different. You've got the DNA in the plant, which is different. You've got 1,000 different compounds in cannabis. You've got 3 trillion cells in your body. Trying to work out what's going on when you throw those two together, never really going to happen. AI might, but again, the AI would have to know everyone's unique DNA and every plant's unique DNA. Maybe it'll get to that stage. But then you've got to find a plant that matches exactly what you need or what's deficient, and
then
still
the fact that every person that is born every day would then have to have that same thing written. Do you know what I mean? Like it would just be impossible. Like to.
You've then also got to understand how each of those compounds interact individually. So how does your receptor CB1? How do all the 1,000 compounds affect CB1? What happens when you put 2 in at once? And a combination of the 2, how does that affect the CB1 receptor? What happens if we have 2 receptors and then we start doing 2 at a time into all of them? You've got all those like endless possibilities basically of cannabinoids and combinations with receptors. It's a long way away until you can basically custom print one for the person. So everyone's trying to work out, will this strain work for me? Will that strain not work for me? They're all going to affect everyone differently, completely and utterly. What makes someone feel awful might be the perfect recipe for someone else. But the problem is, again, how do you get that same product next time? Also damn near impossible. So you're constantly juggling what plant's helping me with which day. Maybe some of it's giving me a net benefit. Maybe some of it's giving me a net positive. You don't know as well because we're experimenting at the end of the day. Everyone's experimenting individually. The doctors are experimenting because they don't know. It's the endocannabinoid system still isn't taught in medical schools. That's another cool fact for people. So, okay, the doctor's going to prescribe it to me and oversee it. Well, he wasn't taught anything about it in medical school, so where the fuck's he going to get his information from? The whole system, no one knows really what they're talking about. So again, that's why we made the training website. So there's Global Cannabinoid Solutions, the company. CannabisScienceTraining.com is the training site for everything anyone could possibly need to know about cannabis science. So we'll have a medical course on there soon. We've got all the free public stuff on there. So we've got a course called Green Shield, which is everything that a public citizen should need to know about cannabis science, facts, what's true, what's not, what's the law, how to stay safe, what to look out for, what's the endocannabinoid system. So the endocannabinoid system bit, and then you mentioned there's one more thing you mentioned, Tom. Have you got it in your notes?
No, I went off on a bit of a tangent on
that. That was off the books. So you said something else as well, Tom.
To be honest with you, it was I was talking about like stuff to do with like people dealing with like coping mechanisms and stuff like that. After I was talking about like cannabinoid systems, so it was basically people like using it in different ways, and that's as much as I
got you.
To be honest with you.
So going back to that again, at the moment, there's no place for anyone to go to get that information. What do I do? Do I smoke it? Do I vape it? Do I rub a cream on my leg? Where do I get that from?
Well, that's the thing is
who do you trust? Do you have any companies that you recommend?
Like, because of the dysregulation, it's kind of like, well, where do you go for that? Like, where do you go for that information? Like, what's a trusted source? Do you know what I mean? Of like, in terms of like do I smoke it? But then smoking is bad for you. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, then do I eat it? But then
what's a vaporizer?
What's a vaporizer? Like, how do I even get hold of these things? Do you know what I mean? And
completely.
Like, am I eligible for that? Do you know what I mean? In terms of like medicinally, am I eligible for that? Because some people might think they are and they're not, and some people might think they're not and they are. Do you know what I mean? Like, depending on the severity of their situation. Do you know what I mean? And obviously, if that information's not there for them to understand, then they're never going to look at it. They're never going to research it, are they? Do you know what I mean? If it's not there on a plate, like, you're not.
And I say CBD, and you might think I mean hemp, or I say cannabis, you might think I mean skunk or an oil or an edible or something else like that. Everyone's just throwing words around. No one knows what they mean. No one knows what it ties to.
It's crazy that it's been going on for so long, though.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like obviously, you're in the know because you're like what you
I had a
do.
super random
You
niche degree in
research
it.
this.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You've got a degree in this. This is what you do for like a career and something you're passionate about. And then there's someone like me who has basically got introduced to it on the recreational side of it, but then
you
kind
see
of
in here.
yeah, but then kind of thought like obviously I'm an inquisitive person. Do you know what I mean? I am with anything, so it's kind of like the same we're talking about with food and stuff like that. Is like I generally kind of want to know where most of my stuff comes from. If like I want to know how to fix things, I want to know how to build things. So like at the end of the day, like there's once again the world of cannabis. There's so much out there in terms of like for me as a chef, flavors,
Yeah, yeah,
just terpenes alone.
yeah, yeah. Exactly,
Do you know what I
exactly.
mean? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
nothing to do with
And
anything
they're all
else.
therapeutic compounds, and
Exactly.
regulated how many terpenes are in your meals. Tom will have to.
But
Do they comply by terpene limits enforced by the government?
that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Is it's madness. Just like obviously, I'm just looking at it just from that one aspect. Is
yeah, yeah.
like just even a flavor profile is such a big thing for me. Do you know what I mean? When it comes to cannabis, it's like I don't know. There's nothing else I get in terms of smell in correlation in anything.
Going back all the way to the evolutionary part, the best, from what I've seen, from what I've read, in the same way that a dog can smell if that water's poisonous or not, you can basically, if the weed doesn't smell good to you, don't consume
Yeah.
it, because your body will know. It's the same way how you know pheromones with dogs and
That's getting clipped, by the way.
yeah, yeah. With like partners, people subconsciously smell each other's smells, don't they?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
armpits. You
yeah,
remember like the Brainiac TV show where they put the
yeah.
armpit smells of like 10 men and the girl have to go.
And they'd have to find out which one was there
Yeah,
because of the like
it's
hormones.
there's certainly an evolutionary element there with regards to like cannabis plants and what smells good to you. What appeals to you biologically is probably a good indicator of what's safe,
Yeah,
something that your body's going to enjoy. Your body's pretty intelligent like that. If you smell something rotten, you know that is, oh, I'm not touching that. That smells like
which I'm gonna.
garbage.
You might know something about this, or you might not, but I find it quite obscure, so I might completely screw this fact up
Oh,
here.
yeah, go on.
But this isn't even like weed related or cannabis
Yeah, yeah.
related. This is you're saying there that our bodies are really good at
It's like
distinguishing.
gut feeling. Go with your gut feeling, not what. You can have all the best information there, but if you don't trust the person, go with your gut feeling, is what they always say now.
They are, but there's something to do with like strawberry flavored
Okay.
products.
Okay.
I'm gonna butcher this.
Yeah, yeah, go on.
Absolutely butcher this. There's something to do with, you know, like if you have like strawberry ice cream, strawberry milkshakes, anything like that, where it's the same chemical compound that is like, and once again I'm gonna get it wrong, is essentially the same chemical compound for the smell of shit.
Potentially.
And there's a reason why we kind of like it as like there's some
Probably.
weird twisted like psychological reason why we like it as individuals like as
Honestly,
humans, but I just find it mental. Like that's just the one thing I know out of everything where people go like I don't like the smell of like
it's sort of
someone
like,
go to the toilet, but I would happily drink a McDonald's strawberry
yeah, yeah,
milkshake.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just like it just doesn't, but once again we're so individually different. Do you know what I mean? Like
There,
yeah,
come. There's also like a collective, right? So you've got your biological intelligence, let's say, like the intelligence that's stored in your DNA. So there's like all your ancient knowledge and wisdom is stored on like your DNA, right? That your body, whether you're conscious of it or not,
yeah,
your body
yeah,
stored it up. There's also some say like a collective intelligence as well. So all our bodies have all been through this, so we all know that that's a bad idea, i.e., World War II or World War One.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to do that again. That's a bad idea. Rats are a great example of what you were saying about smells and strawberries. Most people, there's freaks out there that have pet rats, and I'm sorry to any pet rat owners, but I know a few, and as far as I'm concerned,
I used to when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah, that's freaky stuff. There was always someone at school with a pet rat. Ferrets, I can get around. Rats, my biological red light goes off, and I want to stamp on it, kill it, burn it alive, and it's the same like when people see sharks. That innate
Like biological thing that goes nah.
I've seen too many. I've seen a mate get eaten like that. I'm not doing that again. So I think what's interesting is it seems like cells store all of their experience in DNA, and then we pass that DNA on to our sibling and or offspring, and that intelligence resides in there at a biological level that maybe we're not consciously aware of. But I think that's why we have that similar relationship with cannabis anyway. In that, well,
I just find that strange though. Like obviously you're saying that biologically, but then
pheromones as
but
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've got these people in government and these people that are like
You don't give a
trying to
fuck.
deny their
Yeah,
like
yeah.
their genetic DNA. Do you know what I mean? This thing inside them which goes like, you know what, this can help us
You make
here, mate. You
cannabinoids
know
in
what
your
I
own
mean? This
body, you
can
know.
help
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
Like, it's not going to kill you. Don't worry about it. And there's literally like, so this is the thing that I wanted to get onto. And I'm going to kind of like
Yeah,
close
yeah.
off because we've been running this quite a long time.
Do a full 12-hour podcast.
Because that's kind of one of the points is I was going to go into the myth busting side of it.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of one of the like the myths that's behind it, like in terms of like I don't know where I was going to go with that there, so I'm just going to go into like the actual myths itself instead.
It's the illusion of this. It's the story that's being told to us about something, like going back to Napoleon.
Yeah, but I just find it so peculiar that at the end of the day, like you said, like
No one's got any experience with it, but we all have. Oh no, it's like Voldemort.
yeah,
His
like
name shall not be.
yeah,
I've never met Voldemort, but I know I
it
don't want
it shouldn't be
to.
spoken about. It shouldn't be thingy, but yet there's literally in each individual person's
Your
body,
DNA.
in
Yeah,
your
yeah.
own DNA, that there's something where it just goes like your body's like, yeah, I can have that. That's fine.
I can deal with it.
Yeah, but I guess the myth busting thing that I was going to get to, thanks for getting back to that, was one of the biggest. I guess this isn't even a myth. This is just one of those things which I don't understand because there's the amount of people that have overdosed from alcohol, that have liver failure, that have once again we spoke about cancer because of it, like have so many ailments, have mental health issues, have it, all of those sort of things, but yet not a single person has overdosed from cannabis. They've done stupid shit. Do you know what I mean? Under the influence,
Yeah.
and maybe had a like not the greatest depth perception or like whatever else. But I feel like with them, and obviously this isn't something I've researched at all. I feel like with them, and this is just from my own personal experience, I've never done anything that dumb high.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like usually
You
I'm quite
see,
a
you still
cautious
have all your
person.
self-preservation.
Yeah, like I'm still
For
a
the most
cautious
part.
person.
Yeah,
So like I feel like even if there was like any sort of research and someone going, oh well, actually they had cannabis in the system during this. I feel like it's like the whole COVID thing when everyone was getting like,
Oh yeah,
oh, they're all
COVID in the
died.
system.
Well, they all
Everyone's got
died. Like
antibodies in
they
the
died
system.
from
Yeah.
COVID. Do you know? Like I feel like it's the whole thing of like the same thing as that, where someone goes, "Oh well, no, they died of COVID." It's actually they got hit by a bus, mate, and they had COVID. There's two different. There's a different end of the
completely.
story here. Do you know what I mean? So with the myth busting thing, um, I've only got a few of them. I was trying to like think of some off my head and have a little research into stuff. So you might be able to explain some of these ones. The munchies.
Yeah.
So is there a scientific correlation?
Oh, it's pretty cool. So you've got hormones, say, that nudge your stomach to produce the sensation of hunger.
Man's doing it right now.
Yeah. Bit of ghrelins going, grr, give me some food. Those hormones dictate basically what the biology does in a way. So the nervous system controls the actual movements, but it's the hormones that tell the body when to do those movements, if that makes sense. So it's sort of like your biological clock. When you are hungry, you've got your usual rhythm of hormone comes in, hunger stimulated, passed on, and then you get the release of I forget the name of the hormone, but basically that's like your gut telling you, yeah, food's in the system, we're set,
We're
nice
good.
work. Cease eating. And that's usually triggered by food, but cannabis is an interesting drug that essentially stimulates a lot of those hunger hormones and hunger mechanisms. So the
it kind of tricks the
munchies,
hormone.
the munchies basically tells your body that, oh shit, you're hungry. Now that may be a result of sure, the cannabinoids are touching the activation buttons to say eat food, but then it's also partly a body's response to say, hey, look, there's some crazy compounds in our body. Eat some food to try and
like
get
balance it, or
balance it out a little bit, because it all ends up in the blood. So if you've got other foods and things in there, that'll bind to the THC if your eyes ball. So munchies is almost a way of your body adapting to an overdose of drugs, but also the THC does poke your body and say, hey, eat some of this. Oh, that tastes really good. Oh, eat some more. And so it sort of increases your positive feedback, I suppose, in a way,
right?
around food. And it does with quite a few things, really. So it sort of stimulates your sort of like reward systems with, well, if you're not feeling well, it can sort of stimulate those, so you get the reward systems back, if that makes sense. So when
Yeah,
it comes back to
totally.
your hunger and Crohn's disease and gut disorders, it's the last thing your body wants to do. But if you can push all the hormonal mechanisms and get it
Yeah,
all,
and get it to
fire
kind
it
of,
up with a bit of cannabis, then
that makes total
that can be
sense. Yeah,
done.
that makes total sense
So you're
as
just
to why,
pushing the
like,
hormone, you're throwing the chemicals into your body to push the chemical buttons rather than.
I just like that you kind of like correlated it to that, like the after part with the whole like feeling hunger and having like you said, having gut problems, because at the end of the day everyone kind of sees like the munchies as being such a bad thing, but at the end of the day, like if you can't eat,
If
if
you're
you're
someone that
someone struggling, do you
chemotherapy,
know
if
what I
you're a
mean? Like,
dying
yeah,
cancer patient that
yeah,
can't
like
eat food
you
and you're miserable.
trick your body.
Most people that die from chemotherapy and cancer die from the malnutrition
Starvation.
and just like it just destroys your body
Yeah,
basically.
you
And
can
if you
see
can't
like,
eat, you're never going to replenish and recover. And if you don't enjoy drinking and you can't sleep, like the chemotherapy is
yeah,
just
you've
going to
got
kill
no
you because you're not
reparation at all.
regenerating.
Do you
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean? Because at the end of the day, you need fuel. Like your body needs
completely.
fuel, and if it's not getting fueled by nutrients, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah,
And like if you're
yeah,
already
yeah,
fighting something that is already like impeding on your body, do you know what I mean? Which is taking away from a lot of everything else. Do you know what I mean? So your body isn't concentrating on what it's
yeah,
supposed to be doing anyway. So it's kind of nice to kind of like have that other side of it where it isn't just like, no, it's just the munchies, this is what happens. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's
yeah,
like, well, yeah, there's a reason for that, and there's a reason we can utilize that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Do you
completely.
know what I mean? Like utilize it, because there's not many other things that do that.
It's
Because
all
we
part
can,
of a larger process
I
when
can't
you
think
see
of
these things.
anything else. Like
Mm.
I've never had a doctor go to me, "Oh, take these pills. They're going to make you hungry."
Munch away, yeah, yeah.
Uh, Is there
And
anything
it
that
will
exists like
reduce
that?
your gut motility, and it will reduce your pain,
Yeah,
and reduce all your hypersecretion.
yeah,
So,
and
like,
you won't be stressed, and you might be able to go to
yeah, yeah,
sleep.
exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's just crazy.
Give me that pill now,
Yeah,
basically.
but it doesn't exist, does it?
Yeah, yeah,
But yet we do in this like one little plant form that we can have in multiple variations. It's just about, once again, you said like you're never going to be able to specifically tailor it to each individual person, but you can go right. Well, there's this many milligrams of THC from this type of plant, so sativa or indica, which has this much THC in this plant
even
and this
that's
much
ropey.
CBD. It is ropey, but at
Yeah,
least it's a better guideline.
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know what I mean? Than not having anything
yeah, 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 yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah, yeah.
Like, because yeah, like I don't know whether I've had them where someone's been giving me a pack of edibles and they're like, oh, it's just 20 milligrams. They won't do anything to you. Da, 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 da.
Mm.
And then I've had like 100 milligram ones that people are like, oh, it's going to mess you up. And then the
Yeah,
20 milligram ones have ruined me. And then
yeah,
the 100
sure.
milligram ones have done nothing. Do you know what I mean? And it's blatantly because it hasn't been made properly, it hasn't been manufactured properly, it hasn't been distributed properly, it hasn't been tested at the end level. Do you know what I mean? To go, well, at least there's some
Everyone's just
regulation here.
eyeballing it. Yeah,
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 like there's no
yeah, yeah.
regulation to it. So like there needs to be some regulation to some extent. Do you know what I mean? To go, well, like like you said, on an individual basis, okay, this person's gone through chemotherapy, they need to eat, they need to think, eat. Obviously, I don't want them smoking because they've got lung cancer.
Yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
No,
So now they need oils, or they need to rub this balm into their
you
skin, or
can't.
they need to do whatever. Do you know what I mean? But there needs to be something there. Do you know what I mean? Available for it. It can't just be brushed under the table of like, oh well, actually, it's just this bad thing that like, we don't have a lot of research. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. We have thousands and thousands of years of research. You know what I mean? It's called history.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
called cultural
yeah,
history.
yeah.
Like, not just scientific. Like, it comes from so many
Nobody
other
wants to
aspects.
make the decision. That's what it is. Nobody wants the responsibility of it. That's the interesting thing. Like, So we outsource it to someone who we don't know, can't see, to tell us what's allowed. So you are better off making your own decisions at a certain point. Yes, if you're a patient and you've already got medical complications, you're already down a process with regards to a doctor knows or is tracking what's in your body and what's not. You should keep up to speeds with that. I wouldn't say one thing the cannabis industry doesn't do a very good job of is telling people that they shouldn't take it in cases. So
Yeah.
we'll give a prescription to just about anyone, it seems like, or we'll sell CBD products to just about anyone. But if you're taking prescription medication, going back to what I was saying before about the food and it changes all your hormones, if you're taking medicines and drugs already, it can completely change how those affect your body. And that's where a lot of the side effects come from. They'll say, "Oh, there's cannabis in the system," but it won't say that we was taking 5 different tranquilizers and psychedelic, like
Like
pharmaceuticals for
opioids
depression,
or
yeah,
whatever.
SSRIs or whatever else like that. And so if you are even just consuming a CBD product, it doesn't need to be THC high, like cannabis that's getting you high. Even a CBD product is going to completely affect how your prescription medication is affecting you. Half the 50% of the public's taking prescription medications every day. So for all of them to then go and think, "Oh, I'll try CBD and put that on top of it," God knows what's
No.
going on in their bodies as a result of trying all that too. So like the people that are selling you the products are the people that have created the shitty system that you're already in that's got you ill in the first place. So that's probably not the first people you should go.
Yeah.
You don't go back to the abuser to help you be unabused,
Yeah.
for example. That's a very harsh way of looking at it, but
It's a reality.
yeah, everyone's health is being destroyed basically by the society that we live in, and unless we start like addressing the societal factors that are causing that, we're just on this little loop of insanity of wake up, get about our day, make ourselves feel ill all the time, do that for 20, 30 years, go to hospital, know we're dying because we've done this for the last 30 years, stupid decisions, give us a drug that we know is not really going to help, but it might make us feel better.
Temporarily.
Yeah, and then have some cannabis if we're lucky, and then happy afterlife. There's no reason that needs to be miserable all the way through it. And that, like we were talking about, people just monetizing themselves in different ways and being a bit more creative with their business or job or skill sets that they've got. Like there's so much that people like if people took more responsibility for themselves. We were saying this about voting. Like that almost the act of voting feels like you're giving away your responsibility. And I think a lot of people think,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, I'm voting, that's my responsibility, over with then. And I think we give away a lot of responsibility when we do that voting, and we don't take enough agency for our lives and our health overall. I think that's a fairly general,
We look
safe assessment to make for the
yeah
most part.
we
Someone tells us where we eat, when we can eat. Someone tells us what time we need to be at work. Someone tells us what medications we need to take. Someone tells us where our kids can go to school. We're told what we need to do for everything. For health, we don't really get that information. We're just told, no, don't worry about it. Just go to the doctors when you are deathly ill. That's usually too late at that point, and I don't know whether you go back to school and teach people about health at an earlier age or how to look after themselves, but like nobody knows how to look after themselves. Basically,
I think
people are good at shaving.
like obviously I've got a partner who's a personal trainer. I'm a chef and obviously look into the more like macronutrients, like that side of stuff as well. Obviously it aids her with her health, like
Yeah,
with her work. She aids me because of my like health conditions because of that and stuff. But I do think you are right in terms of like education as a whole. So like not just about cannabis, but exactly what you're talking about there. We're talking about people having a level of manageability when it comes to their health and their well-being, like that never gets taught and has never got
you
taught in
have
this
control
country.
over it as well.
Yeah, and like this is the one thing in your life. This
You
is the
don't have to get sick if you don't
this
want
is
to.
the
Yeah,
only thing in your life you have control of.
literally.
Nothing else in your life you're going to have control of. Like yes, you might choose that job, but whatever happens in that job, you have no control of. Do you know what I mean? You might marry this person, you might choose to marry this person. Whatever happens within that relationship is
Yeah.
not under your control. Do you know what I mean? But the one thing that is our health and our well-being, whether that's our mental well-being, whether that's our physical well-being. Do you know what I mean? And it should just be a case of no matter what it is, we should be looking to minimize relying on uh like when I say medical help, I'm talking exactly what you said there, like going to the doctors and expecting them to fix all of our problems in one. It's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like you've got to take accountability in every aspect of when it comes to your health. So, and that's the same when it comes to CBD,
Yeah,
when it
yeah,
comes to
yeah.
any sort of cannabis industry. Do you know what I mean? Is from what
Completely.
you're telling me there is it needs to be a level of understanding, and if people don't have that level of understanding, then it's never going to change. Do you know what I mean? At all.
I've done all the reading, I've done all the medical research in the world, Tom, and don't get me wrong, I've not done PhDs for years and years and years, but at a certain point, I realized that, well, you can research all these drugs, you can research all this stuff, but fundamentally, people get sick for the same reasons, and we're not solving those reasons. We're just creating more stuff we can sell them when on the deathbed, basically.
Yeah.
And I you've seen it as well. Most people don't know what they're eating. Most people don't know what they're drinking. Most people don't know how the phone works. And until more like all you can do is catch people earlier on, and like I do with the cannabis industry, I can't work with people that are already gone, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
they're in their own bubble. But if you can catch people as they're coming through and help get them to a higher trajectory or help them on their way so that they don't have to, you see these guys, they're just blindly consuming. Good luck
Yeah.
to them. But there is a smarter, simpler, and safer way of doing it that you don't need to fault. The whole, honestly, the whole medical system, the whole approach that it takes, the whole structure and setup of it is there to cash in when you're at your worst. It's not there to stop you being there in the first place because then they've got no customers, as you could see it in the end. So it is really dark
Yeah.
at a super industry policy health level, basically. And yeah, I don't know. Again, well, what are me and you going to do, Tom, ultimately? But
Well, I guess like so.
make more people aware and
Yeah.
take the accountability themselves, really.
So what I was going to say with this
Yeah.
is I was going to tie this off, but I guess what I was going to ask with that was just kind of what you said in there fits into it. Is so what you do on a whole. Um, I guess what I was going to ask is what's your like what's the goal slash future for you with this? Is the goal just to basically inform as many people and create as many networks as possible to basically put this information out there and to have people not be misinformed? Is that the goal? Is that what your business is there for? Would you say or
In a way, I think it's like a multi-pronged approach, really. So the company's knowledge-based, right? And the reason it's a knowledge-based company is because most of that scientific knowledge isn't accessible, isn't people say science and no one knows what it means. I'm trying to make it a tangible point for people to be able to say, hey, look, we need the science on this. Here's the training. Here's all the consulting, shows how to do it, and then here's a way for us to research it and a way for us to interact in research. The goal of the whole organization, with all three legs pushing in one direction, is like I think within our lifetime, Tom, like we should be able to like cure disease. Like there shouldn't be any more disease.
with
It shouldn't be there. It should not exist in 100 years.
I fully agree with you there because if you look at the advancement of technology and there's things that they
Purely
actually
on
put
AI
money
alone.
into,
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you know what I mean? Then realistically, they shouldn't be. Exactly
yeah,
what you
yeah.
were saying there with like, even with the likes of AI, everyone's freaked out about it. Everyone's petrified of it. But at the end of the day, everyone's petrified of the internet. And look at what it does for us now. Look at how much information everybody has now as individuals. Unfortunately, I feel like from my perspective, I feel like it's kind of dumbed people down a bit because they're not willing to go to a library and look at a
Well,
specific.
it's using them rather than them using it,
Yeah,
and it's
there's
like that.
too much all at
The
once.
agency's gone. I think a
Yeah,
lot of people just go in there and fall into it rather than
yeah.
take
Like
it
there's
and bring it out.
there's too much
Yeah,
information,
yeah. You get lost inside it
and you don't
rather
know where
than
to apply
yeah,
it, and you
yeah.
don't know where to put
Completely.
it. So obviously that's what your company does, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? It literally goes like, right, well, I've done that.
Yeah,
You don't need to do that. You don't need to look at those 10,000 hours. You don't need to spend all that time on
yeah,
the
yeah,
internet. You don't need to speak to this person right now. Do you know what I mean? Like you might want to in
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Like you might want to network. You might want to bring these things together. But at the same time, there's the information. Like it's there. Do you know what I mean? And like let's work on this.
Then you're independent. Then
Yeah,
I can work with you, not do stuff for you. Like it's the whole like fishing analogy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can give you a fish, mate. Yeah, sound. But if I can give you a thing, watch this 10-hour video, and you can make all the fish you want forever. It makes sense. So framing that for people is always interesting, but fundamentally, like at this day and age now, maybe make it official on here. Like, there's no reason diseases can't be cured within 50. I'd probably say 50 sooner, less than 50 years, honestly, because I don't know how they've not done it already.
It's
other than it's not
mental. Like
commercially viable.
over 20 years, like our advancement of technology is the quickest it's ever been in like literal billions. Do you know what I mean? In terms of technological, like it's unfathomable. Do you know what I mean? So like, there's no way that we shouldn't be able to. And obviously, with the power and enhancement of more information, like you said earlier, using that toolbox that's not utilized. Do you know what I mean?
And hopefully doesn't have to be utilized because we've preempted and applied the information we've learned from solving the problem can stop us having the problem in the first place. But at the moment, structurally as a society, a lot of people profit off of that.
Yeah.
And so you've got to destabilize like a whole financial infrastructure, basically. And I say destabilize it. It's going to happen because the internet basically is going to spring out and everyone's got access to it. Not everyone's maybe going to have the resources to implement everything, but everyone can definitely start taking control of their health. And imagine if every baby that came out of the womb tomorrow went on a smarter health plan and they got
like proper nutrition
from birth managed, they could society would be completely different.
Yeah,
but we don't do that. We just
dump
some vaccines in them.
Like obviously throughout this entire thing we've talked about, like, and obviously things like global like cannabinoid solutions and like it's talking about that, but obviously like you said there, the end goal isn't just, it's not just to do with cannabis, is it?
No.
Like that's not it's the thing. Like you didn't go into it because you suddenly
had a path.
Yeah, you didn't go into it because you were like, oh well, I love weed. Do you know what I mean? You've seen it as like it's a starting solution, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? For a bigger picture, and it's just about like pushing that forward and getting other people to understand
science is really, it's a science company at the end of the day, but it's focused around cannabinoid science as a pursuit. That's the wrapping, I suppose. But dude,
mint. Anything else you want to talk about? Anything you want to say about it?
I've got a bunch of questions for you about local businesses, but I guess we'll save that for another one and do like a...
Can do if you want, do one with me.
We'll do a reverse flip one and I'll interview you.
I like it, yeah. Mrs. did that with me and it was actually really fun. Yeah, it's always nice because like I don't really tend to, like, I try and put bits in, do you know what I mean, and talk about stuff, but I can only relate to like you said, food related things or certain business aspect.
But that's the important part, because like for me, my biggest problem is people don't understand what I'm talking about. Whether it be science, whether it be cannabinoids, whether it be endocannabinoid systems, anything like that.
Well, do you want to give a shout out?
Science as a whole, really.
Do you want to give a shout out any websites, anything that you...
Oh, yeah.
Basically want people to go to that can actually get the research, and then all on you.
So, anyone that's interested in learning more about cannabis, you've been affected by one of the cannabis topics that we've talked about, you've got a loved one, family member, or you want to start a business, your parents are going to put £100,000 in a cannabis company, do nothing, don't move until you've gone to cannabissciencetrain.com and gone through all the free educational scientific information on there. I've put as much science there as possible for free for the public. Ignore the expensive ones for businesses and investors. They can afford it. But honestly, save yourself £100 on a shitty CBD product. Save yourself tens of pounds, if not hundreds of pounds, on any sort of weed product before you consume it. Spend the first, if you're going to invest in anything, spend any time, go to cannabissciencetrain.com and invest in your own knowledge before you go and buy these products, start experimenting with it, because you're just going to waste your money, damage your health, and piss away a lot of your own time and energy and sanity in the process as well. So, cannabissciencetrain.com. Thank you, Tom.
Get on it.
Awesome.
He knows what he's talking about. So
we'll do it again. Yeah. And time some food.
Yeah, starving. Right. Cheers, guys. Thank you.